Part 50. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 491. Shen Shuwei looked at the stranger in front of her, and the familiarity of the low voice came again. She couldn't help but lean forward and whispered, "You can call me Dr. Shen." The man felt the warm breath blowing towards his face, with a faint fragrance, but not unpleasant. "When you talk, do you like to be close to people?" "That's not the case." Shen Chu said this slightly, still looking up and down at the man in front of him from a close distance. Why does this voice sound similar to Xiao Jinyan? She reached out with doubts to remove the gauze from his eyes, but as soon as she touched it, she was held tightly by a very strong hand. "What do you want to do?" The man's voice was lukewarm, and there was no hint of emotion or anger. Shen Shuwei listened carefully and found that when he first met Xiao Jinyan, he spoke like this, which made people dislike him. If he wasn't so good looking, she wouldn't have thought of secretly drawing him. "Man. Look, it's so hot, and you're wearing such a thick gauze, and the wrapping is so airtight, it's not conducive to the recovery of your eyes. You can actually take it off at night to let it breathe." Shen Shuwei said it very seriously. "She is a doctor. The reason pick it up at your fingertips." The man explained calmly, "You are a doctor, so what you said makes sense, but I can't see the light." Can't see the light? Shen Shuwei now understood why the man covered his eyes so tightly, covering most of his face, and even his eyebrows could not be seen. She asked doubtfully, "Why did your eyes get hurt?" The man paused after hearing this. "I don't remember the details. The doctor said it was burnt by lime." "Are you sure it's lime?" "If it's lime, it wouldn't have happened if you cleaned it in time." Shen Chu touched his chin slightly. "Based on my clinical experience, I guess there are two possibilities for your eyes not being able to see light. One is caused by drugs, and the other is the first possibility is that your eyes were stimulated by strong light and you were temporarily blinded." Seeing that what Dr. Shen said was clear and logical, the man felt that it made some sense. "Do you have a way to cure my eyes?" Shen Chu smiled slightly. "My consultation fee is very expensive, but..." The man asked, "But what?" Shen Shuwei continued to smile evilly. "Take off the thick gauze on your eyes and let me see if you are handsome or not. If you are good looking, I can treat you." "Man, what if it doesn't look good?" Shen Shuwei spread his hands and said, "If you don't look good, you can only double the medical fee. I rely on my medical skills to make a living." "Man." Shen Chu smiled and asked, "Have you made your decision?" The man couldn't wait to recover at this moment, but he didn't know anything about his appearance. After pondering for a moment, he nodded, "I'll show you." Shen Shuwei poked his little hand expectantly. "Will you untie it yourself, or should I help you? I'm so excited to finally see the true face of Lushan. I wonder if looks and voice can be directly proportional?" The man said calmly, "I will do it myself." Shen Chu nodded slightly, "Yeah." The man raised his hand to the back of his head and was about to untie the gauze when a female voice came from the door. "What are you doing here so late?" The man's hand paused and slowly lowered it. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at the woman at the door. She came 3 times and knew that the woman in front of her was Wang Leiwen, the daughter of the clan leader. She sighed in her heart. She came at the wrong time and almost saw the true face of Mount Lu. But it doesn't matter, there is still a chance. Shen Shuwei raised the snowball in his hand. "I'm here to find pets." Xue Tuan blinked twice and his beautiful blue eyes looked like stars in the night sky. Wang Leiwen looked at the cat in Dr. Shen's arms. She hadn't looked carefully a few days ago, but now when she looked at it, she found that the cat was really beautiful. She had never seen a cat of this kind. Now that the pet is found, go back and don't delay his rest. On someone else's territory, Shen Shuwei could only nod, "Okay." After Shen Shuwei hugged the cat and left, Wang Leiwen sat down at the table, looked at the man in front of him, and said excitedly, My third brother is awake. The man was also a little surprised. Wang Jingyuan had been in a coma for so long. All the doctors said there was no cure. Dr. Shen only took him 3 days to wake him up. That Dr. Shen seems to have good medical skills. Wang Leiwen said, although my third brother is awake, his mental condition is not very good. Let's wait and see. What if he is half-hearted? As long as my third brother's disease is cured, I will let Dr. Shen treat you. The man nodded, okay. Wang Leiwen looked at the man in front of her almost infatuatedly. I really look forward to the day when you can see me. You have beautiful eyes. Asterisk. At this time, Qin Xiao hurried back to the military camp and saw Xiao Jinyu guarding the door of the camp, with a surprised look on his face. Prince Yu? Are you waiting for the crown princess to come back to cook something? Xiao Jinyu originally wanted to wait for Shen Shuwei to come back to cook, but after running around on the battlefield for a day, he couldn't bear the hunger, so he went to eat the food in the military camp. When he came back after eating, he found that Shen Shuwei hadn't come back yet, so he waited here. Then I have to live until now. Xiao Jinyu glanced behind Qin Xiao for a few times but did not see Shen Shuwei. His expression immediately changed. Where is my sister-in-law? How did you lose my sister-in-law? Qin Xiao explained, I didn't lose it. The crown princess is now staying in the Xin Miao Imperial City. I came back to get some clothes and I have to go there tomorrow. Xiao Jinyu patted her frightened heart in a soothing manner, you almost scared me to death. If my sister-in-law is lost, the prince will be very worried when he comes back. Qin Xiao. I didn't say anything. Xiao Jinyu felt a little regretful, I can't eat the food cooked by my sister-in-law, but finding the prince is the most important thing. When the prince comes back, I can eat every day. Qin Xiao. Asterisk. Shen Shuwei slept until she woke up naturally, and the only thing that could wake her up was hunger. Although Shen Shuwei was just a doctor, the treatment of doctors in the imperial city was good. After she finished washing, the maids had already placed breakfast on the dining table. Since the maid saw the attitude of Dr. Shen towards pets, she prepared a bowl in advance this time, and also specially prepared a steamed fish. When Shen Shuwei sat down to eat, Swichuan was already sitting on the chair unceremoniously, eating elegantly. After breakfast, there was a routine inspection, which was the same as the modern rounds. When Shen Shuwei went, Wang Jingyuan had been put in a wheelchair by a servant. Compared with yesterday, his complexion did not improve. From the moment Shen Shuwei came in, Wang Jingyuan's eyes had been staring at him with curiosity and exploration. Because he had just woken up yesterday, he was not sure if he was dazzled. Now he could see clearly, it was indeed like that. Shen Shuwei found that the other party had been staring at her face, and she frowned, put your hand up. Wang Jingyuan reacted and found that he had been staring at him. He hurriedly stretched out his hand, and all 5 fingers were wrapped with white medical tape. Shen Shuwei put 2 fingers on the pulse and began to diagnose the pulse. Wang Jingyu had been watching, and when he saw Dr. Shen retract his hand, he couldn't wait to ask, Dr. Shen, you said sun protection yesterday, how do you protect your eyes from the sun? Shen Shuwei explained, just wear a hat to protect your eyelids. Wang Jingyu nodded and said, I'll have someone prepare it right away. After everything was ready, Wang Jingyuan was taken out by the guards and came to the yard. Shen Shuwei instructed, the summer sun is very strong. If you feel uncomfortable in the middle of the journey, you can tell them and ask someone to push you back. Don't force it. Wang Jingyuan nodded, thank you, Dr. Shen. The guard pushed Wang Jingyuan to the sun. The sun was very strong at 10 o'clock. Shen Shuwei sat in the pavilion drinking tea and eating snacks. Swichuan disliked summer the most because it was too hot. It lay on the fence bench and lay there lazily. Shen Shuwei picked up the teacup and saw Wang Leiwen coming over and sitting opposite her. She found that Wang Leiwen liked to wear bright red clothes, just like she liked pink. Wang Leiwen didn't beat around the bush and said straight to the point, "I want to buy your pet." Shen Shuwei took a bite of the pastry and answered very straightforwardly, "No sale." Wang Leiwen asked again, "How much do you want to sell it for?" Shen Shuwei paused chewing, "Didn't I say, no sale?" Wang Leiwen simply made a direct offer, "I'll give you 5,000 gold, you sell the pet to me." Shen Shuwei, "Why don't you understand what I mean? I said I won't sell it." Wang Leiwen gritted his teeth and raised the price again, 10,000 gold. Shen Shuwei shook his head helplessly. He was so young, but he was not as good as a 6-year-old child. Wang Leiwen was a little angry, feeling that he just didn't know what was good for him. 10,000 gold is already a lot if you sell it on the street, it's good to sell it for 1,000 gold. I'll say it one last time. I won't sell it. I won't sell it even for 100,000. Shen Shuwei took a big bite of the pastry and chewed it hard. Wang Leiwen was very angry. He had never seen such an ungrateful person. Wang Leiwen left angrily. Shen Shuwei continued to drink tea until Wang Jingyuan was pushed back and confirmed that there was no accident, then she left the pavilion with peace of mind. Qin Xiao came in the morning and brought a change of clothes. He was relieved to see Shen Shuwei was safe and sound. During the day, there were many people and eyes, so Shen Shuwei did not dare to go to the opposite yard. It was not convenient for her husband to come because of his injured leg. After dark, Shen Shuwei wanted to go to the opposite side with Suichuan in her arms, but was stopped by Qin Xiao. She looked up at him in confusion. "Master, this is the imperial city of the Xin Miao tribe. It is famous for its poisonous insects and is very dangerous." Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously when she heard it, "You make sense. It is better to be alert in unfamiliar places." Qin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief and heard Shen Shuwei say, "So, you go with me and help me stand guard." Qin Xiao didn't know what Shen Shuwei wanted to do, but he followed her anyway. Qin Xiao was a personal bodyguard and was best at protection. It was very easy to hide in the dark and stand guard. Shen Shuwei sneaked into the man's yard with Suichuan in her arms. 2 red lanterns were hung under the eaves. The man sat in a wheelchair, drinking tea slowly. Shen Shuwei came over with Suichuan in her arms and sat down opposite him, and took the initiative to greet him, "I'm here. Good afternoon. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 492. Shen Shuwei was a little nervous, because this time he didn't come looking for pets, but sneaked in on his own initiative. Entering the man's yard at night was suspected of having a private meeting with the man. Ancient thoughts were futile. After a few years, Shen Shuwei felt that he had changed a little bit subtly. The man put down the teacup in his hand and asked calmly, "How old is Dr. Shen?" Shen Shuwei looked at the man in confusion. How could he ask someone about his age? In ancient times, this was very impolite behavior. The man's hand on the table paused, "Fangling? Woman." Shen Shuwei hurriedly stopped, and she was indeed affected. "It doesn't matter how old I am, what's important is that I know how to heal, and I'm a good person." The man said, "I didn't question your medical skills. Then you asked me how old I am and what I'm doing, it's not a blind date." "Man, just curious." Shen Shuwei's eyes fell on the man's face again, and she began to expect him to take off the gauze and reveal his complete facial features. "Then can you take off the gauze now? Let me see why your eyes can't see." The man did not untie the gauze as Shen Shuwei intended, but calmly asked, "Why are you so curious about my appearance?" Shen Shu curled his lips slightly, "Didn't he agree last night to untie the gauze and show it to me? Why are you asking this all of a sudden? You can't say that because his voice sounds like Xiao Jinyan, you're curious about his appearance." What if it's just a coincidence? She pinched Xue Tuan's little paw, feeling a little confused and hesitant. The man heard what Dr. Shen was saying and knew the reason. He asked knowingly, "Is it difficult to answer?" Shen Shuwei asked, "Will you show me?" Then, he straightened his waist, raised his chin and added, "I am a doctor. I can not only treat your eyes, but also your legs." The man chuckled, "The doctor is not from your family." Shen Shuwei couldn't help but feel proud. Looking at the whole ancient times, who was the best doctor who combined Chinese and Western medicine? Then you don't understand. I am the only doctor who combines Chinese and Western medicine. The man's voice was full of doubts. A combination of Chinese and Western. Ancient. A combination of Chinese and Western? What the hell? Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously. "Well, there is no store like this after passing this village." The man pursed his lips and said, "Since you are a doctor, why don't you check your pulse first but look at your eyes?" Shen Chu coughed slightly to relieve his embarrassment, and then pretended to be serious and said, "Since he is a doctor who combines Chinese and Western medicine, his medical treatment is naturally different from others." The man raised the corners of his lips slightly. "Then why do I feel that you have an agenda?" Shen Shuwei. No wonder the blind man in a certain legend has the most sensitive ears. I think the man in front of me is blind but not blind. I can feel it. What Shen Shuwei didn't know was that the other party could hear her inner thoughts and said this deliberately to change the situation between active and passive. "Didn't I tell you that I will judge you based on your appearance? If you are not handsome, you will be ugly. I'm afraid it will affect my appetite." The man did not expose her, but said calmly, "What if I refuse?" Shen Shuwei opened his eyes. Someone actually refused his diagnosis and treatment conditions. It was rare for her to make medical appointments. How could she be so happy as a doctor? "Then what's the reason for your refusal?" The man said calmly, "Didn't I say that I think you have some agenda in approaching me? I will not accept your conditions until I know why you approached me." Shen Shuwei stood up, circled around the man twice, and looked at the knot on the back of the man's head. As long as she pulled off the gauze herself, it would be okay to see that face. Even if he knows martial arts, I can't see it. He should be very successful. In this way, whether the disease can be cured or not depends entirely on her mood. Shen Shuwei silently muttered 1, 2, 3 in his mind and stretched out his hand to pull the gauze. As soon as his fingers touched, his wrist was grabbed by a very strong hand. She felt like the world was spinning and she was about to fall to the ground. She didn't care about the snowball in her arms and threw it away. Then she freed her hand to grab the hand for strength. When she thought about it, she was pressed down by him again. As a result, she was lying on the man's lap. To be precise, it was not on his legs, but on the armrest of the wheelchair. Both of them were stunned for a moment. After Shen Shuwei reacted, she stared at the man's chin for a while. She often looked at Xiao Jinyan from this angle. Although the men were roughly the same, there were differences between handsome men. The difference is that handsome men have no blind spots in their 36 degrees. After the man reacted, he said coldly, "Come down." Shen Shuwei supported the man's shoulders and stood up from the armrest. In the process, physical contact was inevitable. From that moment on, the man smelled the fragrance of the woman. The moment she got up, the fragrance became stronger. Shen Chu slightly rubbed his small waist and pretended to be ecstatic. "My waist is almost broken, it hurts so much." The man paused after hearing this. "If you had spoken nicely and not moved, you wouldn't have fallen to this." Shen Shuwei said dissatisfied, "I told you well, but you went back on your word and didn't keep your word. You made a promise last night, but only one day later, you changed your mind." The man heard a hint of grievance when he heard the words. Because he couldn't see it, he didn't know whether she looked aggrieved at this time. "Because you didn't tell the truth." Shen Shui's heart skipped a beat. The man actually knew that he wasn't telling the truth. She touched her heart. Could it be that there are not only mind-eating goo but also mind-reading goo in this world? Can you hear what I'm thinking? The man paused after hearing this. He didn't expect her to guess it so quickly. You're just stupid. Shen Shui. How could it be so discouraging? The man saw that she didn't say anything, so he took the initiative to speak. You are very different from the people here. Shen Shui raised her chin and said, you are also a little different. The man asked, how are you different? Shen Shui gave him 4 words, poisonous mouth, black belly. The man. Sichuan looked at the two of them in confusion. Shen Shui bent down and picked up Sichuan and planned to leave, but she was a little unwilling. The man's voice was really similar to Xiao Jinyan's. She came back after walking only 2 steps, stood in front of the man, and said in a very serious tone, I'm here to find someone. The man raised his chin and smiled slightly because she told the truth. Then what? Shen Shui continued, I heard that your voice is somewhat similar to the person I'm looking for. Although the probability of being the same person is very small, I still want to see your face. The man said, then do you know that there are many similar people in this world? Shen Shui nodded, of course I know, but I have many ways to verify whether it is the same person. The man seemed to have made up his mind, I can show you, but there are conditions. Shen Shui asked, what conditions? The man said, you must heal my legs and eyes, but you are not allowed to tell anyone. Shen Shui agreed without thinking, no problem, this is a secret between the two of us. The man, come over at this time tomorrow night. Shen Shui nodded, okay. After the matter was settled, Shen Shui said goodbye to the man, turned around and left, and just as she reached the door, she turned back. I'll come tomorrow, you won't regret it again, right? The man shook his head, no, a gentleman's word is as good as a horse. Shen Shui snorted, what about a gentleman? A gentleman who agreed yesterday regretted it today? Man. Shen Shui walked out of the yard and realized that something was wrong. When they were talking about things last night, she was the active party and the one who proposed the conditions. Today, things turned around, she became the passive party and was forced to accept the conditions he proposed. Ah! I was tricked. Sure enough, he is very black-bellied. Shen Shui was just a little dissatisfied, but not angry. After the deal was settled, the man did not feel relieved. Only when his eyes and legs were healed could he really breathe a sigh of relief. Qin Xiao saw Shen Shui and walked out of the dark. Shen Shui, who was talking about things, saw a figure suddenly appear in front of her, and she was scared and ran away in a hurry, completely forgetting Qin Xiao. Qin Xiao didn't understand why, and saw Shen Shui running and ran after her. Shen Shui saw the figure getting closer and closer, especially in the dead of night. The surroundings were quiet and seemed particularly terrifying. I am an atheist, I thought so in my heart, but my legs ran faster than ever. Qin Xiao found that Shen Shui ran very fast, and he ran behind her slowly. Shen Shui ran to her yard in one breath, but the shadow still did not disappear, but followed in. She saw the shadow getting closer and closer until she felt that thing was standing behind her. The night wind blew, and she felt a chill on her back for no reason. Her heartbeat accelerated, as if it would jump out of her throat in the next second, and then the thing behind her spoke. Master, why did you run just now? Shen Shui was stunned for 5 seconds when she heard Qin Xiao's voice. She turned back suddenly, which scared Qin Xiao. Master. When Shen Shui saw Qin Xiao's face, she wiped her forehead with cold sweat. Why are you running? I was scared to death. Qin Xiao didn't understand. I ran because I saw the master running. Shen Shui remembered that she had forgotten Qin Xiao who was keeping watch in the dark. People scare people to death, This sentence is absolutely true. At the same time, the general's mansion. Jun Wuxian went to the palace, and found out that Shen Shuwei was not in the palace. When he came back to ask Su Qingqing, he learned that Xiao Jinyan was missing and Shen Shuwei went to find Xiao Jinyan. Su Qingqing couldn't help but ask curiously, "What are you looking for the crown princess for?" Jun Wuxian paused in shaking his folding fan, and didn't hide it from her. "She looks a bit like my sister. I think my sister should look the same as her when she grows up." Su Qingqing quickly guessed his thoughts. "You miss your sister?" Jun Wuxian said. The wound on Su Qingqing's cheek has scabbed over, and she has used a good scar removal cream, but the wound is too deep and the scar is still clearly visible. Su Qingqing is a girl who loves beauty. She hates this face, and she doesn't want others to see it. She wears a veil even in the mansion. Jun Wuxian has been in the mansion for more than half a month. If he doesn't say he's leaving, she won't take the initiative to mention the word leaving. Because she knows that after this separation, the next time they meet will probably be half a year or a year later. Jun Wuxian often goes out during the day. He doesn't say where he's going, and she doesn't ask. I didn't see Jun Wuxian all day today, and I didn't see him at dinner. At night, Su Qingqing lay in bed, not knowing whether it was because of the heat or insomnia, tossing and turning and unable to sleep. She opened her eyes, just thought for a while, got up, put on her clothes, opened the door and walked out. It was cooler at night than during the day, and the sound of insects continued. Su Qingqing was originally taking a walk, but she came to Jun Wuxian's courtyard while walking. Under the red lantern, there seemed to be a person sitting on a chair in the corridor. The person leaned against the pillar, one leg was bent, and his hand was on his knee. Su Qingqing recognized it as Jun Wuxian at a glance. She walked over with her skirt lifted. As soon as she approached, she smelled the smell of alcohol. With the light from the top of her head, Jun Wuxian's handsome features could be vaguely seen. His eyes were closed, and he looked like he was asleep. Su Qingqing stared at that handsome face for a long time, thinking of the storybook she had read, where the heroine secretly kissed the hero. Looking at Jun Wuxian, who was sleeping at this time, the time and place were right, and it was inevitable that she was a little moved. Her eyes fell on his lips, her little hand tightly grasped his sleeve, and she slowly leaned forward. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 493. Her heartbeat quickened with every step closer. From childhood to adulthood, she had never done anything intimate with a man, not even holding hands. She had never known that the relationship between a man and a woman could be so strong that it made people yearn for it. She had never known that the feeling of liking someone was sour and sweet, making people unable to stop. When she touched the soft lips, her face instantly turned red, like a ripe apple. The kiss that touched the water made Su Qingqing's heart beat like a drum. She hurriedly stepped back and covered her hot cheeks. Thinking of the soft touch just now, her cheeks seemed to be burning. She really kissed Jun Wuxian. Just when Su Qingqing was shocked that she had kissed someone, the person slowly opened his eyes and saw Su Qingqing covering her face in the light. When Su Qingqing came over just now, he noticed it, and thought it was Chu Zhao, so he didn't take it to heart. Until that person walked to his side, the faint fragrance told him that the person was not Chu Zhao. Normally, he should have heard the footsteps, but because he was drunk, his observation was affected. If I didn't feel wrong just now, did Su Qingqing kiss him? He kept his original sitting posture and coughed lightly. Why are you here? Su Qingqing's face was still red. Suddenly, she heard Jun Wuxian's voice. She took a step back in fear and turned to look at Jun Wuxian, who was sitting next to the pillar. He was looking at her at the moment, and her heart skipped a beat. No way, was the kiss discovered? It's over. Well, I couldn't sleep. It was dark and windy. I couldn't see the road clearly, so I ran to you. I saw you sleeping, and I was afraid that you would catch a cold. I wanted to wake you up, but I was afraid of scaring you. Su Qingqing was incoherent and didn't know what she was saying at all. Jun Wuxian raised his chin and looked at Su Qingqing quietly. He knew she was lying, but he didn't expose her. Su Qingqing didn't know if Jun Wuxian had noticed that she had kissed him secretly. Seeing that he didn't say anything, she pursed her lips and said, "Why are you sitting here and sleeping?" Jun Wuxian said, "I drank a little too much, so it's more comfortable to lean on him." Su Qingqing had never seen him drink before, and this was the first time she saw him tonight. They say that drinking can help you forget your sorrows. Maybe he has been here for too long and wants to leave but is too embarrassed to ask. Are you unhappy about something? Jun Wuxian didn't answer but asked, "Why do you ask that?" Su Qingqing glanced at the bottle in his hand. "Aren't you drinking? Men only drink when they are unhappy. I haven't seen you drink before." Jun Wuxian laughed softly, "You just didn't see me when I was drinking." Su Qingqing seemed to have discovered something important. "So, you drink often? Are you often unhappy?" Jun Wuxian smiled and shook his head. "That's not the case. Drinking is just to relieve boredom and entertainment." Su Qingqing secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She thought he was unhappy staying here. "Aren't you sleeping?" Jun Wuxian put down his leg and stood up, looking down at Su Qingqing. Su Qingqing raised her head. Jun Wuxian was too tall. She had to look up to see his face. The lights in the corridor were too dim, and they couldn't see each other's expressions clearly. After a long silence, a magnetic voice came from above. "You just..." Not sure if it was because of guilty conscience, Su Qingqing hurriedly interrupted him, "I just swatted mosquitoes. There are many mosquitoes in summer." Jun Wuxian couldn't help laughing when he heard it. "I'm serious. You take a shower and rest. I'll go back first." Su Qingqing retracted her sight and ran away. It's better to say that she ran away than to leave. She was afraid that Jun Wuxian would know that she kissed him secretly. Jun Wuxian stood in the corridor, watching the petite figure hurriedly leave in the moonlight. "Here is the silver." Su Qingqing ran all the way back to her room and sat in front of the dressing table. She saw the face in the bronze mirror. There were two obvious scars on it. When she touched it, she could still feel the unevenness. Who would like such an ugly face? Her life was ruined by that beast. But that beast had been killed by Jun Wuxian, not only killed, but also disfigured and disabled. No matter how relieved he was, he couldn't restore his face to its original state. If Jun Wuxian knew that she kissed him secretly, would he feel disgusted? Su Qingqing covered her face and ran to the bed. She was too impulsive just now. What if Jun Wuxian was not asleep at that time? Would it be embarrassing to meet him tomorrow? The more Su Qingqing thought about it, the more she couldn't sleep. The next day, Su Qingqing walked out of the boudoir with a pair of dark circles under her eyes. On the way to dinner, she met Jun Wuxian and stopped with a guilty conscience. Last night was dark and windy, and the artists were bold and bold. It was pitch black and nothing could be seen. Now it was broad daylight, and it was difficult to hide the guilty expression. Caixia didn't know what happened last night. When she saw Jun Wuxian, she happily reminded him, Look, Mr. Jun." It was too late when Su Qingqing wanted to stop him. Jun Wuxian's eyes looked over here, and she could only bite the bullet and meet him. "Good morning." She was somewhat glad that she was wearing a veil, which could somewhat hide her guilty mood. Jun Wuxian noticed that her eyes were dark and blue at a glance. "Didn't you sleep well last night?" Su Qingqing said guiltily, "It was too hot last night, and I couldn't sleep." Jun Wuxian nodded thoughtfully. It was indeed a bit hot last night, and there seemed to be mosquitoes. It would have been fine if he didn't mention mosquitoes, but as soon as he mentioned mosquitoes, Su Qingqing's face turned red, and she lowered her eyelids and nodded perfunctorily. Jun Wuxian lowered his eyes and looked at Su Qingqing, with a guilty look. When they arrived at the dining table, the whole family sat together for breakfast. Jun Wuxian is Su Qingqing's savior. The Su family treats him as a distinguished guest and is very generous in eating and drinking. When Su Qingqing eats, she needs to lift her veil with her hands. General Su and the general's wife have advised her several times that there is no need to wear a veil at home, but Su Qingqing just wants to wear it. She doesn't want others to see her face, let alone Jun Wuxian. As long as he didn't see her, the impression she left on him would be the way she looked before her disfigurement. Jun Wuxian raised his head and glanced at Su Qingqing. I heard that the water lilies in the garden are blooming. Upon hearing this, the general's wife immediately answered with a smile, Mr. Jun, the water lilies bloomed last night. After speaking, she turned to her daughter and said, Qing after breakfast, take Mr. Jun to have a look. General Su also nodded, Madam is right, young Master Jun is your friend and savior. It is most appropriate for you to take young Master Jun there. Su Qingqing complained endlessly. She felt very guilty now and didn't want to be alone with Jun Wuxian. But when she saw the expectant looks in her father's and mother's eyes, why did she feel a little strange? Su Changfeng couldn't help but said, Mom, this is not good, my sister is still a girl who has not left the government. The general's wife glared at her youngest son, what do you, a child, know? Eat your food. But mother, this is the most basic etiquette. General Su's eyes widened, after eating, go practice swordplay. Su Changfeng tightened his neck, not even daring to fart, and lowered his head to grab the rice. General Su and the general's wife both thought Jun Wuxian was good, so they wanted to marry their daughter to him, and that's why they were so active in bringing them together. After breakfast, Su Qingqing was ordered by her parents to accompany Jun Wuxian to the lotus pond to enjoy the water lilies. She had seen those water lilies in bloom countless times, almost every year. There is a hexagonal pavilion next to the lotus pond, which is very suitable for flower viewing. The maids have already prepared tea. Su Qingqing was sitting opposite Jun Wuxian. Because she secretly kissed him last night, she felt guilty and did not dare to look at him. She simply looked at several water lilies in the lotus pond. They were the size of a bowl, and the petals were purple. They were very beautiful. Jun Wuxian drank tea slowly and admired the water lilies. He glanced at Su Qingqing and saw that she was a little distracted. After 15, I will leave. When Su Qingqing suddenly heard that he was leaving, she was stunned and didn't react for a while. She knew that Jun Wuxian would leave sooner or later, but she was still reluctant to hear him say leaving. Having to leave so soon? It's such a pity that we can't make it in time for the Cacao festival. Jun Wuxian laughed out loud when he heard this. The Qiao festival is still 50 days away. Ah, Su Qingqing was stunned for a moment. After thinking about it carefully, she realized that she had calculated the time wrong, which was extremely embarrassing. I miscalculated the time. Jun Wuxian chuckled, can you play the piano? Su Qingqing shook her head when she heard this, no. Jun Wuxian asked again, then what do you know? Su Qingqing told the truth, I don't know anything. Jun Wuxian was stunned when he heard this and was amused by her sincerity. Su Qingqing felt that Jun Wuxian was definitely laughing at her. Why are you laughing? Don't they all say that a woman's lack of talent is a virtue? The smile in Jun Wuxian's eyes deepened, what you said makes sense. Su Qingqing suddenly said proudly, I know how to be a female celebrity. Jun Wuxian was a little surprised, I didn't realize that you can be a popular girl. Every girl can do embroidery. If others can do it, I can naturally do it. Su Ching Ching has been learning embroidery for a few days, but has never embroidered anything seriously. Now she plans to embroider a purse. The day Jun Wuxian left, Su Ching Ching stood under the porch and watched him sitting on a tall horse. He was wearing a moon-white brocade robe with dark patterns and gold-woven wide sleeves. He had long black hair and was very handsome. Seeing that he was about to ride away, Su Ching Ching couldn't help but take a few steps forward with her skirt in hand. She raised her head and looked at the man on the horse. When will the next time we meet? Jun Wuxian lowered his eyes and looked at Su Ching Ching. The veil on her cheeks was flowing in the wind, revealing only a pair of sparkling almond eyes. He said with a smile on his lips, "Guess." Su Ching Ching shook her head, "I can't guess." Jun Wuxian had a slight smile on his lips. In our Cacao festival, boys and girls will give gifts to express their love. Su Ching Ching was stunned for a moment when she heard this. When she came to her senses, she saw Jun Wuxian raising his whip and riding away. At this time, the Miao imperial city flourished. Shen Shuwei had been looking forward to the arrival of the evening all day. During the day, he treated Wang Jingyuan with acupuncture and took medicinal baths, and finally stayed up until night. The agreed time was late at night because the man didn't want others to know. In the dead of night, Shen Shuwei sneaked to the opposite courtyard with the medicine box. Snow Tuan followed all the way. Qin Xiao consciously hid in the dark and watched. Shen Shuwei opened the door and walked in with the medicine box on her back. She closed the door only after Xue Tuan came in. She turned around and looked into the room, and saw the man sitting on the table, with a calm posture, as if he had been waiting for a long time. She put the medicine box on the table, then came to the man and said expectantly, "I came as promised, you didn't regret it?" Don't blame her for asking. Last night she came over with high expectations, but he betrayed her. The man shook his head, "No." "That's good." Shen Shuwei stared at the gauze on his eyes and said, "Should you do it yourself, or should I do it?" "Man, I'll do it." When the man's hand reached behind his head, Shen Shuwei couldn't help but hold her breath, watching with anticipation as the man untied the gauze and opened it layer by layer. Good afternoon. Please support me with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 494. Chapter 494. After recognizing him, he actually asked to take off his clothes. Throwing herself into her husband's arms. The room was quiet, and Shen Shuwei seemed to be able to hear each other's heartbeats, thumping. She watched him unblinking one after another without blinking. How many layers were there? Just when the gauze was about to be removed, the man's movements suddenly stopped. Shen Shuwei was a little anxious. "Why did you stop? Are you going to regret it again?" The man shook his head. "No, move the light farther away." Shen Shuwei suddenly remembered that a man's eyes cannot see light, and candle light is also light. "I'll move the light right now." Shen Shuwei picked up the candle on the table, looked around, and landed on the desk next to the wall. After putting it away, she hurriedly sat back on the chair and said, "Okay, you can continue." Xue Tuan sat on the ground and watched the two people working. It tilted its head and looked at the man, as if looking forward to it. The man continued. He methodically untied the last 3 layers of gauze, his movements extremely elegant. On the other hand, Shen Shuwei was very anxious and wanted to pull off the gauze for him personally. While she was looking forward to it, she also thought she might be disappointed. There are many people in this world who look alike and sound similar. The man in front of him would give him a sense of familiarity, but he didn't seem to recognize him. The man pulled off the last layer of gauze. The moment the gauze fell, his facial features were completely exposed to the air. The man's eyes are tightly closed, his eyelashes are thick and long, and his facial features are delicate and three-dimensional, almost perfect. The light in the room was very dark, and Shen Shuwei was shocked for a long time when he looked at a face similar to Xiao Jinyan's. Xiao Jinyan's unparalleled handsome face has been imprinted in his mind. The man in front of him can be said to look exactly like Xiao Jinyan. The man waited for a long time, but she didn't speak. He asked doubtfully, "Why don't you speak?" Shen Chu slightly excitedly held the man's hand and cried with joy, "You are Xiao Jinyan, right?" The man felt his hand being held by two warm hands, which felt soft. He paused and then withdrew his hand. "No." The smile on Shen Shuwei's lips froze. Looking at her empty hands, she looked at the identical face in disbelief. "But you look alike." The man said calmly, "Didn't I tell you that there are many people who look similar?" Shen Chu said slightly, "That's too similar, as if they were carved from the same mold." The man tried for a long time and found that he didn't hear what she was saying tonight. Could it be that his mind-reading skills failed? Also, it is normal to suddenly hear what she is saying and then suddenly not hear it. However, since she couldn't hear or see, it was a bit difficult to tell the truth from what she said, but she meant something different. "I've seen it. Isn't it time for treatment?" Shen Shuwei's tone was extremely serious. "The disease must be cured, but I want to confirm now whether you are Xiao Jinyan." The man frowned, "Will you give up after confirmation?" Shen Chu nodded slightly, "Yeah." The man said, "Okay, how do you want to confirm?" Shen Shuwei looked at the man's chest. He was wearing a white coat, which was so loose that the inside could not be seen through the material. "You have to take off your clothes first." The man frowned, "How can you, a girl, be so unreserved?" Shen Chu raised his chin slightly and said confidently, "I have seen my husband's body countless times, why should I be reserved?" The man asked, "The man you said I look like is your husband?" Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, "Yes, so if you take off your clothes, I will check and know whether you are my husband anymore." When the man thought about stripping off his clothes and letting a woman inspect him, his face turned pale. "It's just ridiculous." Shen Shuwei saw that the man was angry, and she was afraid that he wouldn't let her check, so she did the next best thing, "Let's take off half of it first." "Can we take off our top?" The man's voice became cold. "What do you think I am? An object that I put around randomly?" Shen Shuwei hurriedly explained, "That's not what I meant." "That's not what you mean," the man sneered. "If I asked you to take off your clothes in front of me, how would you feel?" Shen Shuwei looked at his closed eyes and shrugged, "You can't see me even if I take it off." "Of course, if you are my husband, it doesn't matter if you can see it." "Man." After a long silence, the man uttered 4 words, strong words. Shen Chu curled his lips slightly, "Then will you show me?" The man found that his temper was inexplicably irritable today. He calmed down the unknown anger and began to negotiate terms. "I will cure my eyes first and then I will show you. I always keep my word. I will definitely cure you when I say I will cure you. Please show me first so that I can concentrate on treating you." If the man in front of her hadn't seen him, Shen Shuwei would have raised her hand and sworn. She was too anxious to confirm his identity and confirm that he was Xiao Jinyan, so that she could feel at ease. The man snorted, "How do I know that you will turn against me after reading it?" Shen Shuwei couldn't help but retort, "Do you think everyone is like you? Will he change his mind?" The man said in a non-negotiable tone, "Treat the eyes first." Shen Chu gritted his teeth slightly and said, "Okay, let's treat the eyes first." As a doctor, Shen Shuwei was naturally good at treating diseases. She first checked his pulse to determine whether he had any signs of poisoning. The man also reached out his hand very cooperatively, rolled up his sleeves, and exposed a white wrist. Shen Shuwei placed 2 fingers on the pulse and began to diagnose it. She frowned and asked, "Is there any discomfort in your body?" The man answered, "Insomnia, sometimes palpitations, and often weakness in the limbs." Shen Chu said slightly, There are two toxins in your body. It should be that you used the same poison not long ago to fight poison with poison. Because the amount was not uniform enough, you were poisoned. The man seemed calm and asked, "Is the poison easy to cure?" Shen Chu smiled slightly, "It's not a problem for me." The man heard such a confident tone, which he had never heard in a while. From Wang Leiwen's mouth, he felt that the person in front of him was not very old, he seemed to be only about 15 years old. "How old are you anyway?" Shen Chuwei told the truth, "I am 19 years old, but my face looks relatively young." They all thought I was only about 15 years old. The man will understand now. No wonder he asked her how old she was. She said that age is not important, but medical skills are important. Even if you are really 19 years old, it is hard for people to believe that your medical skills are so superb. Shen Chuwei asked, "Why do I want others to affirm my medical skills so much? I don't rely on medical skills to make a living, so I don't need other people's affirmation." Man. Yesterday, he said that he relied on medical skills to make a living, but today he said he didn't. Then what do you rely on for food? Of course you raise me, Shen Chuwei said matter-of-factly and confidently. The man was startled when he heard this. "I will support you." Shen Chu said softly, "Of course, you are my husband, isn't it natural to support me? Don't you want someone else to support you if you don't support your own wife?" The man paused after hearing this and asked, "What if I am not your husband?" "If not, of course you don't need to support me." Then Shen Chuwei said again, "Unless I remarry." When the man heard the word remarry, he frowned hard. "But I believe in my sixth sense." "You are my husband." Shen Chuwei suddenly came over and looked at him with doubts in her eyes. "Why don't you remember me? Did you fall on your head?" Shen Chuwei looked at his head as he spoke, and reached out to touch his head. As soon as he touched his hair, he was grabbed by a hand. "Don't touch me casually, I don't like it." Her voice was slightly deeper, just like the way Xiao Jinyan disliked her back then. "I'm just checking to see if your head is injured. If the head is injured, it will cause blood congestion and compress the nerves, which will cause temporary amnesia." Shen Chuwei explained it very seriously and tried to make it as easy to understand as possible. "But it will definitely hurt, so painful that I can't sleep." The man was stunned for a long time before he uttered a sentence. "You know a lot." "I'm a doctor, so I naturally know a lot." Shen Chu blinked his beautiful eyes twice. "Can you show me now?" A man can feel the breath of the other person, with the sweet scent of sugar, which means that she is very close to him. He didn't like others talking too close to each other, but the person in front of him was not as annoying as he thought. After only a moment of hesitation, the man let go of her hand. Shen Chuwei was free and the corners of her mouth curved beautifully. She stood up and touched his brain, inch by inch, very carefully. "I just touched it for a while and found no trace of injury." She looked confused. "There are no signs of injury." The man said calmly, "I was not injured in the first place." Shen Chuwei raised a question mark on his forehead. "Then why don't you remember me?" The man frowned, raised his hands to cover his eyes, and said in a slightly painful voice, "My eyes can't stand it anymore." Only then did Shen Chuwei realize that his eyes couldn't see light, even at night, and the light from candlelight couldn't work. His eyes were closed but his eyelids were very thin, which seemed to be more serious than she imagined. "I'll detoxify you first, and let's treat your eyes slowly," Shen Chuwei said as she took out a teacup and a bowl of spiritual spring water from the space. After taking it, she took the teacup and handed it to the man's mouth. "This is for detoxification. The poison will be detoxified after drinking it." The man hesitated for a while, then opened his mouth to drink the antidote from the teacup. However, after taking 2 sips, he realized something was wrong. He stopped drinking and asked curiously, "Why is there no taste at all?" Shen Chu said softly, "Wouldn't it be better if it had no taste?" It's too bitter, won't you feel uncomfortable after drinking it? The man asked again uncertainly, are you sure this is the antidote? Shen Shuwei nodded vigorously, of course, can my husband prescribe medicine randomly? The man hesitated again for a while, but decided to believe her once and drank all the water in the teacup in one breath. Shen Shuwei took out a handkerchief and wiped the water stains on the corners of his lips. The man noticed her movements and his body stiffened. He was not used to being so close and intimate with a stranger. Shen Shuwei took out an eye patch from the space and put it on his eyes. The black eye patch formed a sharp contrast with the pale skin. How do you feel? The man praised, not bad. I'll prepare the medicine now. It'll be ready soon. Shen Shuwei began to search for various medicinal materials in the space, and then began to make the ointment. The man made no noise to disturb, and the sound of pounding medicine could be heard from time to time in his ears. Shen Shuwei raised his head and looked at the man happily, okay. The man looked forward to hearing this, hoping to see the light of day again soon. I will disinfect your eyes first, and then apply medicine. Shen Shu disinfected slightly, then tied the gauze with the ointment against his eyes, and then wrapped 2 more gauze, which covered half of his face more beautifully than before. Too much. Sure enough, my husband looks good with a white veil covering his eyes, which makes him look cool and elegant. The man frowned, don't call me my husband all the time. If you don't call me husband, should I call him by his name? Shen Shuwei shook her head, not good. The man ignored her words and said, you go back, I need to rest too. Shen Shuwei agreed readily, okay. Then she walked out with the medicine box. Sichuan looked around at the two of them and immediately chased after them. The man heard the sound of the door closing, and then he moved his wheelchair to the bed. He stood up slowly with the help of the bed, and then sat on the bed. It took him a lot of effort to do such a simple action. He lay down on the bed slowly and found that the ointment was cool and comfortable, unlike the previous ointment, which always had a burning and slightly painful feeling. This shows that her medical skills are still good. Shen Shuwei walked to the bed lightly. If she was not sure that he was Xiao Jinyan tonight, she would definitely not be able to sleep. Just now, she just symbolically closed the door and did not go out. She looked down at the man lying flat on the bed, even his sleeping position was the same as before, lying straight. Her eyes fell on the man's chest. Xiao Jinyan had a scar on his chest. Once he saw the scar, the man would have no choice but to admit it. She rushed over in one go, aiming for the man's collar. The other party seemed to have noticed it, but his legs were inconvenient, so he only stopped her with one hand. Shen Shuwei freed up her other hand to grab the collar and pull it to the right. In the quiet room, there was a sound of fabric tearing, revealing a large piece of white chest. Good night. Acting cute and asking for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 495. There was a deathly silence in the room for a while. Shen Shuwei was also stunned. She didn't mean to rip off his clothes, she just wanted to pull them open and take a look. It's all because she didn't control her strength well and just tore off her clothes. If the other party hadn't been Xiao Jinyan, would she have thought she was a female hooligan? But now she had no time to care about this. She stared at the man's chest, which was no less fair than a woman's skin, but it was also wrapped with gauze. Could it be that he was wounded by a sword? After the man was stunned for a few seconds, he pulled up his clothes randomly in embarrassment. Because he couldn't see it, he could still see his white chest after pulling it up a few times. He shook off her hand and asked in a deep voice, "What exactly do you want to do?" Shen Shuwei pointed at his chest and asked him, "Why are you injured here?" The man said in a deep voice, "What does it have to do with you?" Shen Shuwei looked at the position of his heart. This position was very fragile. Whether it was boxing or a sharp weapon, it could easily hurt the heart and cause death. His eyes, legs, and chest were all injured, which also showed that he had experienced a life and death struggle before, and the other party wanted his life. It hurts a lot. The man was startled when he heard this. Shen Shuwei added, if I had been here at that time, I could have helped you reduce a lot of pain. She raised her head and looked at the man. Seeing her pursed lips and not speaking, she couldn't help but feel a little worried. Why don't you speak? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? The man asked, why did you tear my clothes off? Shen Shuwei explained, my husband has a scar on his chest. I heard from him that it has been there for many years. The man continued to ask, what about now? Of course your chest injury cannot be used as evidence. Shen Shuwei paused here, but I believe you are Xiao Jinyan, my husband. The man was about to say whether he could give up, when he heard her last words and frowned, I'm not. Shen Shuwei put down the medicine box and sat down by the bed, and couldn't help but ask, why don't you believe what I said? Do you have to tell me that you have a mole on your thigh? The man didn't know whether he was angry or ashamed, his ears turned red, and he pointed his slender fingers at the door, get out of here. Shen Shuwei sat still. The matter was not clear. How could she leave? Then you have to tell me why you think you are not Xiao Jinyan? If you are not Xiao Jinyan, who could you be? The man said coldly, who I am has nothing to do with you. All you have to do is heal my eyes and legs. Shen Shuwei stared at the man for a long time. She always felt that Xiao Jinyan had more than just amnesia. If he had amnesia, he wouldn't have this reaction. It couldn't be that he was possessed by some kind of poison, but he didn't look like he was possessed by a poison. I will definitely heal your eyes and legs, and I will also prove that you are my husband. The man didn't want to argue with her at all. At this time, he was extremely tired and just wanted to have a good rest. Shen Chu bent down slightly, picked up the medicine box, stood up and walked out. After taking a few steps, she returned to the bed and looked at the motionless man lying there. You can even forget your own wife. I doubt that in your heart, I don't play a big role at all. After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, she turned around and strode out, closing the door behind her. On the way back, Shen Shuwei walked a little carelessly. Qin Xiao walked out of the darkness and followed slowly behind him. After returning to the guest room, Shen Shuwei looked back at Qin Xiao, I seem to have found His Highness. Qin Xiao looked happy when he heard this, where is the master? Shen Chu said softly, he was seriously injured in the room I just entered. Moreover, he didn't remember me and thought he was not Xiao Jinyan. Qin Xiao's smile froze, Master, has he lost his memory? Shen Chu shook his head slightly, it's not like that. I asked him and he was willing to tell. I'm going to find the master. Qin Xiao turned around and walked out, but was stopped by Shen Shuwei, this is someone else's territory. You don't know everything. If you go to him rashly, something might happen. Qin Xiao paused when he heard this. He really didn't know anything, so he just went to find his master. If something happened to him, his life would be small. If the master and the princess were involved, he would be in trouble. He turned around and clasped his fists in salute, I understand. Shen Chu said softly, let's rest first. He won't be able to escape for the time being anyway. Let's take our time. Qin Xiao nodded in response. Shen Shuwei picked up Swichuan and returned to the guest room. After closing the door, he went back to the bed. Swichuan lay on the edge of the pillow and stared at her. She looked at Xuetuan, reached out and pinched its fleshy solace, what happened to Xiao Jinyan? Miao Xuetuan blinked his blue eyes twice to express his ignorance. Shen Shuwei went to sleep with doubts, and she had another dream. In the dream, she found herself sitting in the arms of a young man, holding the saddle tightly with her two little hands, and the horse was galloping all the way. She couldn't help but giggle, Brother Jinyan. The picture changed, and suddenly I was in a peach blossom forest. It was the season when peach blossoms were in full bloom, with spring breeze blowing and flowers raining all over the sky. She raised her head and looked at the boy behind her, trying to see clearly who the girl was calling, Brother Chu Jinyan. Dong dong. Shen Chuwei was awakened by a knock on the door, and she didn't see the boy's face clearly from the beginning to the end. Brother Jinyan, she has dreamed about him several times, and she wakes up every time she wants to see clearly what the other person looks like. When the maid came in to deliver breakfast, she realized that it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. Shen Chu stretched slightly and got up to wash up. When he came to eat, Xue Tuan had already finished eating and was sitting on a chair licking his paws gracefully. Shen Chuwei suddenly understood why Suichuan jumped into the arms of a strange man so actively, because that man was Xiao Jinyan. After breakfast, they had a routine checkup. Wang Jingyu saw Dr. Shen coming and said happily, "Third brother can eat a bowl of rice at a meal now, and his complexion is better." Shen Chuwei first looked at Wang Jingyuan. His complexion was indeed much better than the previous 2 days, and his lips were not so pale. This disease needs to be treated slowly. Today is still acupuncture, and then use a medicinal bath after half an hour of sun exposure. I'll have someone boil hot water. Wang Jingyu strode out. Acupuncture requires lying on the bed. Wang Jingyuan lay on the bed with the help of a servant, and the maid unbuttoned his shirt to expose his chest. Shen Chuwei held the silver needle in his hand, bent down to find the acupuncture point, and gave Wang Jingyuan acupuncture with ease, without looking sideways. Wang Jingyuan had been staring at Dr. Shen's eyebrows and eyes, and accidentally saw the ear hole on her earlobe. He was stunned for a moment, afraid that he had seen it wrong. He raised his body to get closer to see it clearly. Shen Chuwei was doing acupuncture, and if she was not careful, she would die. When she found that the patient was moving, she hurriedly reached out and pressed Wang Jingyuan's chest, saying seriously, "If you don't want to die, don't move." Wang Jingyuan finally reacted, and he nodded a little embarrassedly, "Okay." Shen Chuwei continued acupuncture after seeing that he was quiet. Wang Jingyuan looked at Dr. Shen's earlobe again, and confirmed that it was the ear hole that only women had. Dr. Shen was a woman? Dr. Shen's accent doesn't sound like a local. Where is Dr. Shen from? Shen Chuwei glanced at Wang Jingyuan calmly, "Not being a local won't affect your treatment, don't worry." Wang Jingyuan explained, "That's not what I meant. Dr. Shen doesn't look very old, but his medical skills are so good." Shen Chuwei was tired of hearing this sentence about young age. She looked up at Wang Jingyuan and smiled faintly, "You don't look very old either." Wang Jingyuan said, "But I don't have such great medical skills as you, I'm ashamed." Shen Chuwei looked at Wang Jingyu curiously and asked in a low voice, "You should know how to cast a gu, right?" Wang Jingyuan said, "As the son of the clan leader, of course I can." Shen Chuwei became interested when she heard this. She stood up from the chair and sat on the bed, and then continued to ask, "Do you think there is a way to make a memory disappear?" Wang Jingyuan answered very straightforwardly, "No." Shen Chuwei frowned. "Without this gu, why didn't Xiao Jinyan remember her? Don't you remember that you are Xiao Jinyan?" Seeing that she didn't say anything, Wang Jingyuan asked in confusion, "Why does Dr. Shen ask this? I have a friend who doesn't remember me, and even thinks that he is not a friend." Shen Chuwei looked at Wang Jingyuan, "Do you think this situation is poisoned?" Wang Jingyuan said, "The situation you are talking about is amnesia, it should not be poisoned." Shen Chuwei sighed with some sorrow. "It's not poisoned, but it doesn't look like amnesia." Asterisk. When Wang Leiwen came to visit Lin Xian in the morning, she found that the gauze on his eyes had changed. She hurried over, "Why is your gauze wrapped so little? Isn't it uncomfortable?" After that, she turned around and scolded the maid, "How do you serve the master? Can't the gauze be wrapped properly?" The maid was scolded and didn't even dare to raise her head. Lin Xian explained calmly, I did it myself, it has nothing to do with her. You can't stand the light in your eyes? This little gauze can't block the light outside. I'll bandage you again. Wang Leiwen stood up to get the gauze, but was stopped by Lin Xian. No, I'm fine now. Wang Leiwen said excitedly, really? Does this mean that the medicine is still effective? I'll ask the doctor to prescribe some more medicine so that you can recover soon. Lin Xian nodded, yeah. Wang Leiwen asked again, are you bored staying in the room? How about I push you out for a walk? Lin Xian shook his head, no, I like to stay in the room. Wang Leiwen looked at Lin Xian's legs and guessed why he didn't want to go out. As long as his eyes and legs were cured, he would definitely want to go out for a walk. I found that you have lost weight. Is the food not to your taste? Compared to a few months ago, Lin Xian can be said to have lost weight. In addition to the injury, he was also not used to the food. Lin Xian nodded, it's true that I'm not used to it. I'll send someone to find the chef now, Wang Leiwen said and left impatiently. Not only Wang Leiwen noticed it, Shen Chuwei also found that Xiao Jinyan had lost a lot of weight. She took out the ingredients in advance, borrowed the kitchen, and started cooking. There was no one in the kitchen at this time. Qin Xiao saw Shen Chuwei cooking and wanted to help, but found that he was not needed at all. Shen Chuwei's movements were swift, like a professional chef, not like a daughter who had never touched the water. 2 dishes and 1 soup, braised eggplant, cola chicken wings, tomato egg soup. These home-cooked dishes are very good with rice, and they are also Xiao Jinyan's favorite. After Shen Chuwei finished cooking, she put the food into the food box. When she went to Xiao Jinyan's yard, Shen Chuwei held Sichuan, and Qin Xiao carried the food box in one hand and the medicine box in the other, and followed her slowly. It was late at night and there was only a creaking sound, and the door was pushed open from the outside. Lin Xian looked up and guessed that it was Dr. Shen who came. I'm here. Shen Chuwei happily sat opposite Xiao Jinyan holding Sichuan. When Qin Xiao saw the man in the wheelchair, he found that the injury was more serious than he thought. He came over excitedly, put the food box and medicine box on the table and chair respectively, and then opened the food box and placed the food on the table one by one. He looked at his master, resisted the urge to come forward to recognize him, and turned to leave. Lin Xian had a poor appetite, and the daily meals were not to his taste, so he ate very little. Now he smelled the fragrance of the food, and his hunger was more obvious. What smells so good? Shen Chu smiled and said, food, I found that you are much thinner than when you left. Because I was in a hurry, I prepared some home-cooked dishes. Good evening, babies. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 496. This is the second time that Lin Xian has heard someone say that he has lost a lot of weight. When Wang Leiwen said it, he didn't feel anything. But when Dr. Shen said it, he was a little surprised. It might be because she brought food with her. Shen Chuwei took a bowl and put a bowl of rice in front of Xiao Jinyan, picked up the chopsticks and picked up a piece of cola chicken wing and braised eggplant and put them in the bowl. I picked up the food for you, eat it while it's hot, it won't taste good when it's cold. Lin Xian felt a pair of chopsticks stuffed into his hand, he clenched the chopsticks, probably because he was hungry. He picked up the eggplant in the bowl and put it into his mouth and chewed it slowly, and found that it tasted good, so he picked up some more rice and put it into his mouth. He picked up the cola chicken wing and put it into his mouth. The dish just now was something he had never eaten before, and he didn't know what it was. This time it was still something he had never eaten before, but it tasted very good. What dish is this? Shen Shuwei said, Cola chicken wings, you just ate braised eggplant, they are all dishes you usually like to eat? Lin Xian was stunned for a moment, and then reacted, the person she was talking about was her husband, not him. Shen Shuwei took a bowl and put some tomato and egg soup in front of him, this is tomato and egg soup, drink some while it's hot. Lin Xian paused chewing when he heard this. This was the first time he had heard of tomato and egg soup. He reached out to pick up the bowl with curiosity. Because he couldn't see, he moved slowly. When his fingertips touched the bowl, he picked it up and handed it to his mouth to drink a sip. He found that it tasted good, so he drank several more sips in a row. Shen Shuwei held Sichuan and waited for Xiao Jinyan to put down the bowl. She glanced at him and drank more than half of the soup. Even if she didn't remember it, she still loved to drink soup and eat dishes. Lin Xian had never eaten 2 bowls of rice since he woke up, but today he actually ate 3 bowls of rice. His stomach, which had never been full, was very full today. Shen Shuwei took a handkerchief to wipe the oil stains from the corners of his lips for him. Lin Xian's body stiffened and he instinctively turned his head away, I'll do it myself. Shen Shuwei paused and looked at Xiao Jinyan's disgusted behavior. Thinking that he didn't remember it, she didn't care and put the handkerchief in his hand. Lin Xian wiped the corners of his lips elegantly with the handkerchief. Shen Shuwei looked at him and it seemed that he had not changed at all, except that he was thinner and didn't speak, as if nothing had happened. I'll change the dressing for you. Lin Xian, yes. Shen Shuwei put Sichuan in his arms. Lin Xian felt a sinking on his legs, reached out and touched it, only to find that it was her pet, and the fur was very comfortable to touch. Shen Shuwei prepared the ointment in advance, so there was no need to prepare it in advance. She opened the medicine box and took out the ointment prepared in advance and applied it on the gauze, then stood up and came behind Xiao Jinyan to untie the gauze on his eyes. Xiao Jinyan cooperated, and the dressing change process went smoothly. Lin Xian asked, how long will it take for the eyes to heal? Shen Shuwei said, if nothing unexpected happens, within half a month, it may be earlier. Within half a month, Lin Xian felt that the time was a bit long, but now he could only wait. Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan's legs. His legs were long and straight. Because it was too late last night, he didn't have time to see it. Let me check your legs. Lin Xian nodded, yes. As long as it was for treatment, Lin Xian would cooperate unconditionally. He wanted to walk like a normal person and go anywhere alone like a normal person. Shen Shuwei squatted down in front of him, put her hand on his ankle, and rolled up his trouser legs little by little to above his knees. When the knees were exposed, a large area of bruises came into view. Shen Shuwei was shocked. After so long, the bruises had not disappeared yet. She reached out to touch her knees and touched warm skin. Lin Xian subconsciously wanted to hide, but thinking that she was a doctor who could cure his legs, he resisted. Shen Shuwei touched her knees and found that there was a serious injury there. Then she rolled up another trouser leg. This knee looked lighter than the right one, but it was equally serious. The worst injury she had seen Xiao Jinyan in was only an injury to his arm. He was poisoned, which was nothing compared to this time. How much did that man hate Xiao Jinyan? He poisoned him before killing him, destroyed his eyes and legs, and finally stabbed him in the chest. She couldn't imagine how Xiao Jinyan had survived after walking through the gates of hell. Shen Shuwei couldn't control herself and hugged Xiao Jinyan. Tears fell down and her voice was choked, who did it? This is obviously to torture you on purpose, wanting you to live a life worse than death. Shen Shuwei has always been optimistic and cheerful in her life. No matter how big the difficulties are, she is optimistic and has never been overjoyed or sad. But this time, she was so angry and sad that she wanted to cry, so she couldn't control her tears like beads that had broken off the string. The snowball caught in the middle felt that it was not the right time to come out tonight, and there was a risk of becoming a meat bun. Lin Xian was at a loss for what to do by her sudden action. He looked at her crying so sadly while hugging his neck. He was stunned for a long time and tried to push her away. He found that she hugged him very tightly. After a while, his shoulders were soaked. He was not good at comforting people, especially crying women. "Don't cry." Shen Shuwei let go of his neck and wiped away her tears. "That man is too vicious. Is he your enemy? Don't let me catch him, or I will let him taste the taste of life worse than death." Shen Shuwei choked and said harsh words. Lin Xian was stunned when he heard this. He probably didn't expect her to do this, but he knew that it was all because he looked like her husband. "We'll talk about revenge later. Let's treat the disease first." Shen Shuwei wiped away her tears and squatted down in front of him again, looking at the seriously injured leg. The treatment process would be more troublesome than the eyes. However, as long as it can be cured, it doesn't matter how long it takes. Shen Shuwei will devote herself wholeheartedly to treating the disease, and her serious expression is very different from her usual. Lin Xian couldn't see it, but he probably felt that she was very quiet during treatment, so quiet that her breathing was very shallow. "Your knee is seriously injured and the bones are soaked in serious medicine to grow back, but the process will be slower. In fact, it was a severe comminuted fracture, but Xiao Jinyan's injury was on his knee, which would make it more difficult to recover." Lin Xian knew from the tone of her voice that she was very different from other doctors, and believed that she could definitely cure his legs and eyes. "As long as it can be cured, I can afford to wait no matter how long it takes." Shen Shuwei saw that Xiao Jinyan was so strong and did not suffer from various injuries. These were things that ordinary people could not do. "It takes time to prepare the medicine. I'll come back tomorrow night." Lin Xian nodded. Shen Shuwei stood up and pushed the wheelchair towards the bed. Lin Xian noticed something was wrong and asked, "What are you doing?" Shen Chu said softly, "I'll help you go to bed to rest." Lin Xian refused directly, "No, I can do it myself." Explained, "Your leg is seriously injured. Before the bone has grown well, it is better not to put any force on it, so as not to affect the recovery." Lin Xian's words of rejection again stuck in his throat. Shen Chu pushed him slightly to the bedside. When she reached out to help him, she saw the snowball in his arms and said, "Do you know why I went to the waterside pavilion on the first day I came to the imperial city?" Lin Xian recalled that he was in Shuixi that day because of the pet in his arms. "Aren't you here to find the pet?" Shen Shuwei looked at Xuetuan, feeling a little glad that he didn't take the trouble to bring Xuetuan out. "Yes, I'm just here to find pets. If it weren't for Sichuan, I wouldn't know you were here." Lin Xian asked doubtfully, "What do you mean?" Shen Shuwei explained, "Although Sichuan is a cat, his nose is more sensitive than that of a dog. Sichuan is your pet and knows your scent well, so he brought me to you as soon as possible." Lin Xian touched the cat in his arms and smiled, "It's just a cat." Shen Shuwei initially regarded Sichuan as an ordinary cat. After getting along with him for several years, she realized that Sichuan was very, very smart. Don't underestimate Xuetuan. It's very smart, and it won't let strangers hold it, let alone jump into strangers' arms. Lin Xian said, "So what?" Shen Shuwei thought he would understand if she said this, but in the end she said, "So what?" in such a plain tone. "Don't you understand this? Because you are its owner, that's why it will jump into your arms." Lin Xian touched Xuetuan's plush head and found that it was leaning into his hand. He said, "The cat is very docile. It jumped into my arms, which means it likes me more." Shen Shuwei felt that all his patience had been used up at this time. He explained over and over again, but he didn't believe it. "Why don't you believe what I say? Have you lost your memory or been poisoned?" Lin Xian said calmly, "I have not lost my memory, nor have I been poisoned. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but ask, then why don't you remember your wife? Lin Xian didn't explain much, you should go back and rest. It's already late at night. I'll help you get on the bed first. Shen Shuwei put his hand on her shoulder, hugged his waist and reminded, don't use force on your feet, put all your weight on me. Lin Xian had 2 experiences with her, so he knew that she was short and very thin. If he put his weight on her, he would definitely crush her. Shen Shuwei noticed that he didn't use any force on his hands and guessed his thoughts, and reminded him again, do you think your legs will never recover? Hurry up and put your weight on me. Lin Xian. He tried to put his weight on her, expecting to crush her, but to his surprise, she was very strong. He doesn't like others to wait on him, so he goes to bed by himself every day, which is very difficult. This time, having someone support me significantly saves effort and reduces pain. Shen Shuwei laid him flat on the bed. She was actually a little sleepy at this time, but she felt a little sad when she saw Xiao Jinyan not remembering her. You said you're not Xiao Jinyan, then tell me who you are? What's your name? Lin Xian said calmly, my name is Lin Xian. Lin Xian? Shen Chu frowned slightly and asked, what else? Where is home? Why do you appear here? Lin Xiandao, these are my privacy, there is no need to tell you, right? Shen Shuwei said confidently, but you are my husband, and I have the right to know your false identity. Lin Xian did not argue with her, it doesn't make sense to you, go back and rest. Shen Shuwei said a little aggrievedly, are you tired of me? Lin Xian retorted, I didn't. Shen Shuwei asked again, then do you still want a wife? Lin Xian couldn't see, and his hearing was very sensitive. He felt that she was about to cry. You are not my wife, please stop asking me these irrelevant questions. Shen Shuwei clenched his sleeves, thinking that he was seriously injured now, and he couldn't remember what he said because of some reason. It was not his intention, so he endured it. If you're not your wife, you should wait until you remember me before you say it. If you still think I'm not your wife, I'll ask to leave. Shen Shuwei took out a bamboo tube from the space and put it in his palm. Lin Xian felt the coldness in his hand and asked in confusion, what is this? Shen Shuwei said, there is a portrait in the bamboo tube. I painted it myself before you left. When your eyes are better, take a look at this painting, and you will know that everything I said is true. Shen Shuwei stood up after speaking, packed up the medicine box and prepared to leave. Lin Xian touched the bamboo tube in his hand in confusion, a little curious about what the painting could be. Shen Shuwei went and came back, supported the bed with one hand, leaned over and kissed his cheek, husband, good night. After Shen Shuwei kissed, she was about to leave, and was suddenly grabbed by a hand, Xiaoju. Good night, babies. Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 497. Chapter 497. This is a short separation, and the husband is a bit of a crowd pleaser. After kissing, Shen Shuwei was about to leave, but as soon as she turned around, her wrist was grabbed, Xiaoju. Shen Shuwei paused, thinking that she had heard wrongly. Xiao Jinyan seemed to call her Xiaoju just now. She turned around and lay on the bed, looking at Xiao Jinyan expectantly, what did you call me just now? Lin Xian frowned, trying to calm the sudden pain. He held the wrist in his hand tightly, and fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He didn't let go until the pain subsided. Nothing. Shen Shuwei frowned, could it be that her ears were weak? She stared at Xiao Jinyan for a long time in confusion. He had medicine on his eyes. Even if he didn't apply medicine, she couldn't tell from his hidden eyes. Then why did you hold my hand just now? And you held it so tightly. Lin Xian slowed down and said softly, You are not reserved. Shen Shuwei curled her lips, showing some dissatisfaction. I just kissed your face, not your mouth. Is this not reserved? What if I kissed you? Lin Xian, what would you do if you were kissed by an unfamiliar man? Shen Shuwei said very seriously, I will only do these intimate things with my husband, and others will not have the opportunity. Lin Xian repeated again, I mean if. Shen Shuwei still said very seriously, there is no if, because I will not give others this opportunity. Lin Xian. Shen Shuwei lay on the bed, and seeing that he did not say anything, she took the initiative to hold his hand and asked expectantly, Husband, they say that a short separation is better than a new marriage. We have been separated for more than 4 months. Can I stay tonight? Shen Shuwei just wanted to lie next to Xiao Jinyan to take care of him, but Lin Xian heard that she wanted to do something inappropriate for children. Lin Xian pulled back his hand and refused directly, You are not allowed to call me husband, and you are not allowed to stay. Shen Shuwei was a little sad after being rejected. I don't know who stayed in my room every night before, saying that husband and wife should sleep in the same bed, and they are so disgusted with me after being separated for 4 months. Lin Xian's tone was a little impatient, You should say these words to your husband, not me. Yes, I shouldn't tell you. When you remember, I hope your husband can sleep alone in his own room so hard. Shen Shuwei snorted, picked up the medicine box and food box and walked out. Close the door before leaving. Lin Xian sighed for a long time, and when he was about to go to bed, the door was suddenly pushed open. He frowned, Who? Shen Shuwei strode in, saw the bamboo tube on the bed, she picked it up directly, and then put it back into the space with her mind. I brought back the painting. If you don't remember it now, it would be bad if you throw it away as garbage or see it by others. It's better for me to keep it myself. Lin Xian. Shen Shuwei took the painting and left without staying for long. After Shen Shuwei left, the room returned to silence again, but Lin Xian couldn't fall asleep no matter what. All he could think about was the good night, overlapping with the good night in his memory. After Shen Shuwei came out, Qin Xiao immediately stepped forward to take the food box and medicine box from her hand, and couldn't help asking, How is the master now? Hasn't he remembered yet? Shen Shuwei sighed helplessly, There is no sign of remembering yet. He is seriously injured. The most important thing for us now is to heal his injuries and then find a way to leave here. Qin Xiao just saw that people who learn martial arts know too well how seriously the master is injured. How could the master be injured so badly? Shen Shuwei shook her head, I don't know either. It feels like an enemy who was too cruel. By the way, find a way to get a chicken tomorrow. I want to stew chicken soup for him to nourish him. Qin Xiao said, Leave this to my subordinates. The next night, Qin Xiao got a chicken from somewhere and it was clean when he gave it to Shen Shuwei. Shen Shuwei put in precious medicinal materials and stewed it for half an hour. During this half hour, she made 3 dishes. Braised spare ribs, boiled fish fillet, and ants climbing trees. In the dead of night, Lin Xian was a little surprised and happy to learn that Dr. Shen had brought food again. Because after eating the food she brought last night, he couldn't eat a bite of food made by others. He was already starving. Qin Xiao put the food in the food box on the table and left. Shen Shuwei first served a bowl of chicken soup and placed it in front of Xiao Jinyan. This is chicken soup. I put herbs in it. It has the effect of regenerating muscles and strengthening bones. It was the first time that Lin Xian heard of herbs that can regenerate muscles and strengthen bones. Even without asking, he guessed how precious these herbs were. I'm sorry that you spent money. Shen Shuwei heard him say polite words and corrected him, What did the family say about spending money? You should be glad that your wife is a miracle doctor who will do everything to cure you. Lin Xian pursed his lips. He had heard many doctors say that the probability of curing his eyes was very low, and that his legs might be like this for the rest of his life. But he never gave up. Fortunately, he did not give up on himself and met a miracle doctor. Lin Xian suddenly raised the corner of his lips. If your husband is in a wheelchair all his life, will you stay with him? Shen Shuwei looked at the boiled fish slices with a little greed. She picked up the spare chopsticks, picked up a piece and put it into her mouth to eat. Hearing Xiao Jinyan's question, she puffed her cheeks and said, if he remains consistent, I will naturally stay with him. If he betrays me, even if he wears the dragon robe one day, I will leave without looking back. Lin Xian was stunned when he heard this. He didn't expect that she was also a person who valued love and justice. She was also a sweet-tempered person who could take things and let them go. Shen Shuwei thought the boiled fish fillets she made tasted good, so she couldn't help but put another piece into her mouth and started eating. Lin Xian heard the slight sound of chewing and realized that she was eating vegetables. She cooked the food, so what did it matter if she ate it? After dinner, Shen Shuwei changed the medicine on his eyes. After changing the medicine, Shen Shuwei took out the needle, scalpel, and medicine and waited for the items that would be used. These were all prepared in advance during the day. She brought a small stool and placed it in front of Xiao Jinyan, then sat on it, bent down and rolled up her trouser legs, revealing a pair of fair and slender legs. The knee was no different from last night, it was still bruised, and the knee was obviously swollen. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. The leg injury is serious. I need acupuncture to remove the blood stasis. It will be very painful. Lin Xian said, I'm not afraid of pain. Shen Chu said softly, how can a person not be afraid of pain? But it doesn't matter, I will relieve the pain for you. Lin Xian was startled when he heard this, and suddenly thought of what she said last night. If she was here, she would definitely help him reduce his pain, maybe with anesthetics. Shen Shuwei did use anesthetics, but he prepared them himself, with almost zero side effects. After injecting the anesthetic, Shen Shuwei took out the silver needle and started acupuncture. It took about an hour for the blood stasis to drain out. Shen Shuwei frowned when she saw that the blood stasis flowing out was dark black. Then she looked at Xiao Jinyan's knee. After removing the blood stasis, it was obvious that the swelling had subsided a lot. After doing all this, it was time to make the medicine. It was too troublesome to make the medicine. She used the method of applying the medicine, but it just took a little longer. She carefully applied the medicine on her knees. After it was evenly applied, she wrapped it layer by layer with white gauze. Because of the anesthesia, Lin Xian did not feel any pain during the whole process. By the time the bandage was finished, it was already late at night. Shen Chu wiped the sweat from his forehead slightly and said, "Husband, it has been bandaged." Lin Xian said sincerely, "Thank you." Shen Chu frowned slightly, "These are all what I should do." "Husband, there is no need to say thank you." Lin Xian opened his mouth, but finally said nothing. "I'll help you get some rest on the bed." Lin Xian didn't refuse either. After Shen Shuwei pushed the wheelchair to the bedside, he stood in front of Xiao Jinyan, bent down and put his hands under his armpits, and then hugged him. When Lin Xian refused, it was already too late. Shen Shuwei had already picked him up. This position caused the two bodies to stick together tightly, and they could clearly feel the soft touch in front of them. He stiffened and frowned, "What are you doing?" "I'll carry you to bed." "Don't worry, I'm very strong and won't throw you." Husband Shen Shuwei carried Xiao Jinyan to the bed with a little effort. It's not that she doesn't want to be hugged by the princess, it's just that she really doesn't have the strength. Lin Xian was just carried to the bed. He didn't know how to react for a moment. Anyone else would be angry if he was picked up by a woman. Before Lin Xian could react, Shen Shuwei helped him lie flat on the bed. "Lin Xian." Shen Shuwei looked at his chest. She didn't see it with her own eyes, so she was still a little worried. The wound on your heart hasn't healed for a long time. Let me check it out for you. Lin Xian hesitated for a while, then nodded, okay. After Shen Shuwei got his consent, she simply opened Xiao Jinyan's clothes and saw the heart wrapped with gauze. She couldn't wait to untie the gauze and saw the wound on the chest. She thought it was a sword wound, but she didn't expect that the heart seemed to be hit by a sharp weapon. I cut out a piece of it abruptly, but the wound has not scabbed for so long. As a doctor, I understand wounds all too well. She suspected that the person who wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan was a pervert who liked to kill people in a sadistic way. It's just that it hasn't healed for so long, which is really incredible. Lin Xian had also been curious about why the wound on his chest would not heal, and the doctors were helpless. Why doesn't the wound heal? Shen Chu said softly, I don't know either. I'll disinfect you first with the powder I prepared myself, and then we'll see the effect in 3 days. Lin Xian, okay. Shen Chu carefully disinfected the wound first, and then sprinkled it on the wound with the medicine he prepared to speed up the healing and scabbing of the wound. Then she bandaged it carefully and got dressed. Shen Chu stretched slightly. After working for several hours, she was not only tired but also sleepy. This is why she was unwilling to rely on medical skills to make a living even if she knew medical skills. She was too tired. She lay on the bed and asked expectantly, Husband, can I? Tonight. Before Shen Shuwei could finish speaking, Lin Xian refused directly, no. Shen Shuwei. So heartless. She was indeed tired at this time and missed her bed very much. She slowly stood up and kissed his lips. Good night. As soon as Shen Chu stood up, Lin Xian grabbed his wrist. His voice was a little urgent, what do you mean by good night? Good night? Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 498. This was Lin Xian's instinctive reaction, fearing that he would miss some important information if he was a second late. Especially the 2 words good night, which were particularly sensitive. Shen Shuwei was very sleepy at this time, and planned to go to bed after saying good night. The kiss was also because she was said to be unrestrained last night. They are already an old couple, what is there to talk about being reserved? But suddenly grabbing her wrist, that extremely cold voice scared away all her sleepiness. Shen Shuwei stared at the man in a daze, and found that he was very excited at this time, as if he was stimulated by something. She asked cautiously, what's wrong with you? Lin Xian did not answer but asked, why do you say good night to me? Shen Shuwei's forehead was full of question marks, can't I say it? But good night doesn't mean to scold people, it means I like you. Lin Xian frowned, the blue veins on his forehead were clearly visible, and fine beads of sweat flowed out on his fair skin. Shen Shuwei felt that her wrist was about to be strangled by the man, and the force was even greater than last night. When she was about to struggle, the man suddenly let go of her hand. Lin Xian felt a splitting headache and was extremely uncomfortable, but he forced himself to stay calm. He couldn't help but moan in pain, Xiaoju, wait for me. The voice was too soft, Shen Shuwei didn't hear what the man said, and saw that the man's hands were tightly grasping the bed sheet, causing the bed sheet to become wrinkled. Only then did he realize that something was wrong with the man. Husband, what's wrong with you? Shen Shuwei held the man's hand and wanted to take his pulse, but was thrown away by the man, don't touch me. Lin Xian was like a frightened young animal at this time, not wanting anyone to touch him, wanting to be comforted but afraid of being comforted. In Shen Shuwei's eyes, Xiao Jinyan was a flower of the high mountain, a prince who was in control of the situation, and his emotions were not revealed. He had never seen Xiao Jinyan moaning in pain like this. She couldn't help but feel anxious, but, I think you seem to be in pain. Lin Xian ignored Shen Shuwei. The more he thought about it, the more his head hurt. He couldn't control himself from thinking about it. He was eager to grab something. It felt like holding quicksand. The more he wanted to grab it, the faster it slipped away, making him anxious. Shen Shuwei was so worried that she had to force him to take his pulse. However, as soon as she stretched out her hand, the man grabbed it. She was stunned for a moment, then freed up her other hand to take his pulse. Fortunately, he didn't shake her hand off this time. There were no other symptoms from the pulse, just too excited. I don't know if it was because of the fall off the cliff, or the sequelae of the life and death battle with the enemy. If it was a psychological reason, she would be helpless. After all, she was not a psychologist. Shen Shuwei took out the homemade calming incense from the space and lit it with a lighter. Wisps of green smoke filled the whole room. The man gradually calmed down, probably because he was too tired, and fell asleep in a short while. Shen Shuwei saw that he fell asleep, so she got up and left. For several days, Shen Shuwei went to Xiao Jinyan's place every night, and she would bring hot meals when she went. When she checked Xiao Jinyan's chest wound, she found that the wound could not heal. After 4 days, blood still oozed from the chest. This was the first time Shen Shuwei had seen such a situation since she was a child, and her delicate eyebrows wrinkled into a ball. From the moment she untied the gauze, Lin Xian didn't hear her speak. If it were usual, she would definitely explain the wound to him. "What's wrong?" Shen Shuwei explained slowly, "It's a bit strange. The medicine I prepared is made of extremely precious medicinal materials, which are particularly effective in healing wound scabs and promoting blood circulation and regenerating muscles. However, after 4 days of medication, the wound still did not improve, which is very abnormal." During the time when Shen Shuwei treated him, Lin Xian knew that she was doing her best to treat him. Not only did she treat him, but she also carefully prepared meals for him, and they were different every day. Although all this was because he was very similar to her husband, she did not deny that she was really responsible and a good person. "It's good that you have tried your best. It may be my physical condition. I will disinfect you first and try to use twice as much medicine. If the wound does not heal for a long time, it is easy to get infected." Shen Shuwei's eyes were a little solemn. She was a doctor and knew that the wound on the chest would endanger life if it did not heal. Okay, Lin Xian didn't understand these things, so he naturally listened to her. After Shen Shuwei dealt with the wound on the chest neatly, she was full of worries. What was the reason for encountering such a difficult wound for the first time? These days, Wang Leiwen has been helping Lin Xian find a chef. Today, the 12th chef is trying the dishes. The 3 dishes and 1 soup in front of Lin Xian were made by the 12th chef. Wang Leiwen looked at Lin Xian with expectation. This is a new chef who was hired recently. Try it and see how it tastes. If you like it, let him cook for you in the future. Okay, Lin Xian picked up the chopsticks and slowly picked up the dishes and put them into his mouth. In the eyes of others, Lin Xian's appearance when eating is elegant and noble, just like ordinary people. Wang Leiwen waited for him to finish all the dishes, and asked impatiently, "How does it taste?" Lin Xian's appetite has become better since he ate the food cooked by Shen Shuwei. In the past, he thought it was okay, but now, it's a bit hard to swallow. He shook his head slowly. Wang Leiwen saw that he didn't like it, so he ordered, "Let the cook go and hire a new cook." "Yes, Princess Leiwen." The guard took the order and left. Wang Leiwen coaxed, "You can eat some first, I will find a cook who suits your taste as soon as possible." Lin Xian nodded lightly, "Yeah." Lin Xian now has no expectations for breakfast and lunch. The only thing he expects is that Shen Shuwei will bring him food at night. Just like tonight, he is looking forward to what kind of food Shen Shuwei will bring him. No matter what kind of food, it will suit his appetite. Before Shen Shuwei finds out what happened to Xiao Jinyan and whether it has anything to do with Wang Leiwen, she is afraid of arousing suspicion from others. She dare not go to Xiao Jinyan easily during the day, and she goes secretly at night. In addition to treating Wang Jingyuan during the day, the rest of the time is lying down and eating snacks to pass the time. Sichuan lies on the couch in the posture of salted fish. When it is warm here, it moves to another place to continue lying like a salted fish. With the treatment of Dr. Shen, Wang Jingyuan has recovered a lot and can walk alone without red face or panting. Shen Shuwei stays up late every night. After lunch, she lies on the couch to catch up on sleep. Just as he was about to close his eyes, Qin Xiao strode in. "Sir, Lord Wang Jingyuan wants to see you." Shen Shuwei said lazily, "Why is he here as a patient instead of lying down?" Qin Xiao said, "I don't know." As soon as Qin Xiao finished speaking, Wang Jingyuan walked in and saw Dr. Shen lying on the couch. He stepped forward and greeted him, "Dr. Shen." Shen Shuwei saw someone coming, so she had to open her eyes and look at Wang Jingyuan. "What are you doing here?" Shen Shuwei's voice was soft, which made people feel soft. Wang Jingyuan had a gentle smile on his handsome face. "I want to talk to Dr. Shen." Shen Shuwei didn't want to chat at all now, she just wanted to play chess with Zhou Gong. But Wang Jingyuan was the son of the clan leader after all, so she could only deal with him a few words. "Can I ask you a question?" Wang Jingyuan was just trying to find a topic to chat, and he didn't feel embarrassed but happy when he heard it. "Dr. Shen, if you have anything to say, please ask me. I will tell you everything I know." Shen Shuwei didn't hesitate to ask directly, "You said that the wound didn't heal for a long time. Is it possible that it was because of the poisonous insect?" She thought about this question for 2 days, but still couldn't figure it out. Seeing Wang Jingyuan was there, she casually asked. Wang Jingyuan just thought about it for a while and said, "It's possible. There is a kind of poisonous insect that feeds on human flesh and blood. If you have a wound on your body and are poisoned by this kind of poison, it will be difficult for the wound to heal." Shen Shuwei's originally drowsy mind suddenly became clear after listening to Wang Jingyuan's words. She propped herself up and sat up, looking at Wang Jingyuan with curiosity. "Is there really such a poison?" Wang Jing nodded. "Of course, why did Dr. Shen ask this?" Shen Shuwei said, "I am a doctor, I am very curious about these things. If I encounter such a situation in the future, I will not be ridiculed for my poor medical skills." Wang Jingyuan smiled and said, "This is the truth. People who don't understand will definitely think that the doctor's medical skills are not good." Shen Shuwei came over with a smile. "I see that you know a lot, so can you remove the poison?" Wang Jingyuan chuckled, "Yes." Shen Shuwei was secretly happy when she heard this, and finally there was a way to cure Xiao Jinyan's heart injury. "How to remove the poison?" Wang Jingyuan replied, "Use blood as a medium and meat as a guide to remove the poison." Shen Shuwei was confused when she heard it. She pulled Wang Jingyuan's sleeve. "Can you explain how to remove the poison in plain words?" Wang Jingyuan did not keep it a secret. He explained it roughly in plain words. Shen Shuwei understood now, but it was useless because it required a Gu master to complete it. She was a doctor, not a Gu master, so she couldn't remove the Gu. Shen Shuwei sighed. Could it be that the person who wanted to kill Xiao Jinyan would also put a Gu? Cut out the heart, and put a Gu, so poisonous. "Dr. Shen, where are you from?" Shen Shuwei came back to her senses, raised her head and saw Wang Jing far away from her, so close that she could see the tiny pores on Wang Jing's skin. She instinctively moved back. "Why are you so close to me?" Wang Jingyuan sat up straight and shook his head slightly embarrassedly. "Nothing, just curious about where you are from." Shen Shuwei smiled slightly. "Actually, I'm curious about you too." Wang Jingyuan became interested after hearing this. "What are you curious about me?" Shen Shuwei said seriously, "Curious about why you are so seriously ill." Wang Jingyuan shook his head. "I don't know either." When I was a child, a fortune teller told me that I would not live past 25. Shen Shuwei couldn't help but admire the fortune teller, because she knew Wang Jingyuan's condition very well, and he would not live long. Seeing that she didn't say anything, Wang Jingyuan smiled and said, "What? Are you scared?" Shen Shuwei shook her head, "I just think it's a pity." Wang Jingyuan laughed out loud, "It's a pity, I haven't married yet and have children." Shen Shuwei said, "Then why don't you hurry up and marry and have children, there's still time." Wang Jingyuan smiled helplessly, "I can't marry the girl I like in this life." Shen Shuwei felt a little sad for some reason. Most of her feelings about men and women came from romance novels. She and Xiao Jinyan got married first and then fell in love. She didn't know much about love, but it was enough for her to know that the person she liked was Xiao Jinyan. In the dead of night, Shen Shuwei came to Xiao Jinyan's room again. She came here every night and was already familiar with it. Lin Xian had been sitting at the table waiting for Shen Shuwei. When he heard the door open, he subconsciously raised his head. Qin Xiao put the food on the table as usual and then left quietly. Without Shen Shuwei's reminder, Lin Xian picked up the chopsticks and impatiently put the food into his mouth and chewed it slowly. Although he didn't know what the dish was, it was delicious. Shen Shuwei knew Xiao Jinyan's eating style too well. It was elegant and noble. But recently she found that Xiao Jinyan ate more fiercely than usual. Although he looked better than her, she still noticed it. She asked distressedly, "Husband, don't they give you food during the day?" Lin Xian paused chewing and shook his head, "I have never missed 3 meals a day, and afternoon tea is never missed." Shen Shuwei asked puzzledly, "Then why are you so hungry? Has anyone guessed what's wrong with the male protagonist's memory? Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 499. Lin Xian was embarrassed to say that 3 meals a day was a lot, but he just took 2 bites and stopped eating. Because it didn't suit his appetite, he waited to eat the meal she sent. He coughed lightly and said, "I'm not hungry. If you bring me food, I'll naturally eat it up." Shen Shuwei knew Xiao Jinyan well. He only ate 7/10 of his food when he was full. If he ate too much, he would feel uncomfortable. She would prepare late-night snacks because she saw that he had lost weight. During this time, she would either stew chicken soup or ginseng soup, which were both great tonics. "Then you'd better eat less. It won't be good if you hold yourself back." "It's okay." Lin Xian continued to eat the rice in the bowl slowly. He had been hungry all day and expected to be full at night. How could he eat less? Shen Shuwei felt that it was too difficult for Xiao Jinyan. In order not to embarrass him, she decided not to cook tomorrow night. "Although my husband's approach is very touching, it's too stomach-breaking. I'll just make soup tomorrow night. If you drink some soup, you won't be embarrassed to eat." Lin Xian stopped eating when he heard this. He had been waiting all day just for this meal. How could he be satisfied just by drinking soup? "I can't hold on." He didn't care about Shen Chu calling his husband slightly. If this pause was gone, he would really starve to death. Shen Chu said softly, "How can you not hold on? Husband, please don't help me." Lin Xian had no other choice but to say, "I didn't eat dinner." Shen Shuwei asked and was stunned for a moment, then realized, "No wonder my husband is in a hurry for dinner. It turns out there is no dinner." Lin Xian drank some soup. Not only did he not eat dinner, he only had a few bites of breakfast and lunch. Shen Chu touched Sichuan's ears slightly and looked at Xiao Jinyan's chest. She said with some sadness, "I asked Wang Jingyuan today that the injury on your heart may be caused by a poison. The poison is made of flesh and blood food, that's why the wound never heals. Lin Xian raised his head. As far as I know, you and Wang Jingyuan have only known each other for a short time. You trust him so much that you asked him about this. Shen Chu said softly, we have known each other for a short time, but I think Wang Jingyuan is a pretty good person, and he always answers all questions. I just asked casually, and did not mention my husband. He also answered very carefully, and explained again without bothering. Lin Xian snorted, you don't know that people can pretend, and your feeling is wrong. Shen Chuwei felt that Xiao Jinyan was questioning his ability to see people. I have always had a good eye. I think Wang Jingyuan is not a bad person. Maybe he can help you get rid of the poison. Shen Chuwei's behavior was stupid in Lin Xian's eyes. He had only been together for such a short time and easily believed what others said. When you are deceived, you will know how bad your vision is. Shen Chu curled his lips slightly. Why do you always think that my husband has bad taste? If I have bad taste, how can I fall in love with you? At present, except that my husband doesn't remember me, he is very good in other aspects. Lin Xian. Shen Chuwei said again, no one can guarantee that he will not be deceived in his life. He will not be suspicious of others when he employs them. Do you think what I said is right, husband? Lin Xian was so angry that he didn't want to speak. He lowered his head and continued eating. He didn't know why he was so angry. What did he have to do with her being deceived? After eating, Shen Chuwei began to change his dressing. This was done every day for a few days. Once he got used to it, he would be able to do it very quickly. Only the wound on her heart made her frown, not knowing what to do. After all the medicine was changed, Shen Chuwei helped Xiao Jinyan go to bed. Since the last time she hugged Xiao Jinyan to bed, she was not allowed to hug him. She helped him to bed. Lin Xian felt that she had recovered a lot during these days, not only because of Shen Chuwei's treatment, but also because of her nightly meal, Dabu decoction, which had a lot to do with it. Shen Chuwei sat down on the bed. After much hesitation, she decided to discuss the matter of undoing the poison with him. Husband, I want Wang Jingyuan to come and remove the poison for you. Lin Xian said coldly, don't call me husband. Shen Chuwei retorted, I just barked several times, but you didn't say not to bark. Lin Xian was speechless for a moment, feeling inexplicably that he was full and refused to admit his guilt. Shen Chuwei pondered for a long time and thought of a possibility. She suddenly approached Xiao Jinyan and said with some dissatisfaction, are you afraid that I said I wanted to stay overnight, so you said that on purpose? Lin Xiandao, a man and a woman are alone in the same room. It is you who affects your reputation, not me. Shen Chuwei said it matter-of-factly, but I'm dressing up as a man now. Besides, we are husband and wife, so it's only natural that we live in the same room. Lin Xian was a little annoyed. He grabbed Shen Chuwei's wrist and asked, what do you want me to say so that you will definitely believe that I am not your husband? Shen Chuwei never thought that she would worry about convincing her husband that she was his wife, but when an accident happened, no matter how helpless she was, there was nothing she could do. You don't need to say anything. You will know later. In 3 days, my husband's eyes will be able to see. Maybe my husband will remember me after seeing me. Lin Xian heard that he would be able to see in 3 days, and was a little excited for a moment. Are you serious? I will be able to see in 3 days. Shen Chu nodded slightly, as expected, I can see. I also hope that my husband can see the light again soon. Eating will be much more convenient. Lin Xian was immersed in joy and ignored her and called him husband. 3 days later, he could see things. Nothing made him happier than this. 3 days later. Today, Lin Xian was looking forward to nightfall more than ever. He had been sitting at the table drinking tea. He did not eat the lunch brought by the maid, probably because Shen Chuwei would bring food in the evening, which gave him the capital not to eat. In the afternoon, Wang Leiwen walked in with a worried look on his face and saw Lin Xian in a wheelchair. Even though he was in a wheelchair, he could not conceal his noble aura. His features are like snow on the mountain, and his expression is like the moon in the clouds, which is the most suitable way to describe him. Wang Leiwen walked over slowly, sat down opposite Lin Xian, and said worriedly, "I heard from the maid that you didn't eat lunch. I'm a little worried. You are sick and weak. How can you stay healthy if you don't eat?" Lin Xian stopped drinking tea and said calmly, "I don't have much appetite." In fact, Lin Xian didn't say it, but Wang Leiwen also guessed that she was very anxious because she couldn't find a satisfactory cook after recruiting for so long. "I know the food is not to your taste. I have sent someone outside to find a cook. He should be found soon. Lin Xiandao, I've made you worry." Wang Leiwen showed a shy smile and said, "You don't have to be so polite in front of me." Lin Xian said warmly, "For my sake, I not only caused you trouble but also cost you money." "Thank you." Wang Leiwen said with a serious face, "As long as I can cure you, I will be very happy." "No need to say thank you, it is too intrusive." Lin Xian, "Okay, I won't say anything. In a few days, the annual water splashing festival will be held. The scene is very lively. Unfortunately." Wang Leiwen looked at the man in front of her. Forget about the insomnia in her eyes, her legs were seriously injured. Otherwise, she could have participated in the water splashing festival with her. Festival. Lin Xiandao, it's not too late to participate in the future. Wang Leiwen laughed happily when he heard this. "That's true, you will definitely get better." Lin Xian gave a soft hum. Wang Leiwen stayed for a while and then left. As soon as he left the yard, he saw a snow-white cat running towards the side. She had never seen such a beautiful cat. Last time she wanted to spend a lot of money to buy it from Dr. Shen, but it was a pity that Dr. Shen didn't know what to do. She had never given up on wanting to own this cat. Now that she saw it, she wanted to catch it. Just grab it and own it without spending a penny. Wang Leiwen ordered his followers, "You two, catch that cat." "Yes, princess." Two burly followers took the order and attacked Shui Tuan. Snow Tuan just wanted to visit. When he saw the two giants surrounding him, he turned around and ran back. The entourage immediately chased after him, but Swichuan ran very fast and disappeared into the flowers after a while. The two followers stepped into the flowers and searched for a long time but could not find Shui Tuan. Seeing that they failed to catch Swichuan, Wang Leiwen cursed, "Trash, what's the use of spending money to support you?" At this time, Shui Tuan quickly ran into the house, and when he saw Shen Shui, he let out a long breath. The baby was frightened to death and was almost captured by the bad woman. Shen Shui glanced at the snowball, looking shocked. She took out the dried fish from the space, tore it open, and poured it into the bowl. When Shui Tuan smelled the fishy smell, his eyes lit up and he immediately jumped on the bed. Without Shen Shui's need to say anything, he walked over and ate the small dried fish in the bowl to calm down his shock. Shen Shui was lying on the couch, watching the snow dumplings eating dried fish, but in her heart she was looking forward to the evening, because tonight she could remove the gauze and Xiao Jinyan could see her. I wonder if Xiao Jinyan can immediately remember that she is his wife when he sees her? At night, when the kitchen was empty, Shen Shui sneaked in to cook. Today, she stewed pork ribs with corn, and the soup was particularly fragrant. Tomato scrambled eggs, potato stewed beef, 6 meatballs. On the way, Qin Xiao was carrying a medicine box in one hand and a food box in the other. He couldn't help but ask, "Can the master really see the light again tonight?" Shen Shui said slightly, "It can be seen if nothing unexpected happens. We will know later." Qin Xiao nodded, looking forward to his master seeing the light again. Shen Shui walked into the yard with Shui Tuan in her arms and found Xiao Jinyan sitting in the yard. She used to be in the house. Husband, why are you outside? There are mosquitoes outside, Shen Shuwei said, putting the snowball into his arms and pushing the wheelchair into the house. Lin Xian didn't say that he really couldn't wait any longer, so he came out to wait. Qin Xiao walked in, closed the door, turned around and came to the table, took the meals out of the food box one by one and placed them on the table. Lin Xian couldn't wait to ask, can the gauze be removed now? Shen Chu nodded slightly, well, I'll help you take it off now and have a look. Qin Xiao stood aside and looked expectantly. Shen Chu looked slightly at the back of the man's head, reached out to untie the knot of gauze, grabbed the top of the gauze with his fingers and untied it with a little force. Compared to Shen Chu, who was slightly calm, Lin Xian was very nervous and waited for more than 10 days, fearing that he would be disappointed. It's the last day of the month, Beizai, please vote for me. Good evening, baby. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 500. When Lin Xian was nervous, he subconsciously grabbed Suichuan's legs, and Suichuan cried out in dissatisfaction, meow. Only then did Lin Xian realize that he was too nervous and mistook Suichuan's legs for sleeves. Shen Shuwei slowly untied the layers of gauze. She was calm because she was a doctor, and she was still looking forward to Xiao Jinyan's early recovery. When the gauze was completely untied, Shen Shuwei took the gauze and walked to the front, looking at Xiao Jinyan's eyes after being soaked in herbs, which were still stained with drug residue. Shen Shuwei took out clean gauze from the medicine box and wet it in the spiritual spring water prepared in advance, and then gently wiped his eyes. After repeating several times, he finally wiped the drug residue off his eyes. The area around the eyes that had not seen the sun for several days became whiter and tenderer. Shen Shuwei looked at the beautiful phoenix eyes expectantly, husband, you can open your eyes now. Lin Xian pursed her thin lips and hesitated for a few seconds because of nervousness, thinking that if she really couldn't see, she could just wait for some time. He took a deep breath and slowly opened his narrow eyes. He only opened a crack and then closed his eyes again. Eyes that had not seen light for a long time would still feel a little uncomfortable even if they saw the faint candle light. After adapting, he tried to open his eyes again, and what he saw was a face as delicate as a porcelain doll, and the eyes were more dazzling than the stars in the night sky. Shen Shuwei asked expectantly, husband, can you see me? Lin Xian stared at the woman in men's clothes in front of him. Before he could see her, he imagined her to be a woman with a baby face, because everyone said she looked very young. Now that he saw her, he realized that she was not a baby face, but a childish face, pure eyes, green eyes, and a small face as big as a palm, which made her look very young. If he hadn't known in advance that she was 19 years old, he would have thought that she might not have reached the age of marriage. This is the woman who treated him, brought him food every night, and called him husband. Shen Shuwei blinked her beautiful eyes twice and asked in confusion, husband, why don't you speak? Can't you see it? Then she comforted him gently, husband, don't worry, it may be a short time, you can see it in 2 days. Lin Xian can not only hear her talking but also see her now. The feeling is completely different. He found the confused look on the face of the woman in front of him very cute. The tone of voice when calling him husband is coquettish and not annoying. Husband, let's eat first. When Shen Shuwei stood up to push the wheelchair, Lin Xian held her hand and said, I can see it. Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curved, really? Lin Xian looked at the woman in front of him, and smiled like a crescent moon because of happiness. When she smiled, 2 small canine teeth were exposed. He nodded, yeah. Shen Shuwei asked happily, does the husband remember it? Lin Xian shook his head, and when he reacted, he found that he actually shook his head. Shen Shuwei was just a little disappointed, and then she said happily, it doesn't matter, I will definitely remember it later. Let's have dinner now. I made 4 happiness meatballs. Lin Xian was already hungry at this time, but his attention was all on his eyes, so he ignored his stomach. After Shen Shuwei reminded him, he immediately found that he was very hungry. He turned his head to look at the dining table and immediately smelled the fragrance of the food. At the same time, he also saw 3 dishes and a soup on the table. Before, he ate without seeing, and every time he picked up the food, he felt like winning a prize. However, after trying a few times, he found that no matter which dish, it was very suitable for his appetite. Shen Shuwei pushed the wheelchair to the dining table and sat down on the chair. Lin Xian saw a man standing beside him. He raised his head and glanced. It was a tall and handsome man who was staring at him at this time. He asked Shen Shuwei, "Who is he?" Shen Shuwei explained, "He is Qin Xiao, your personal guard." Qin Xiao excitedly stepped forward and half knelt, "Master, I am late." Lin Xian frowned and uttered 2 words in a cold voice, "Get out." Qin Xiao raised his head and looked at his master, then at Shen Shuwei. Shen Shuwei waved at him, signaling him to leave first. "I'll take my leave." Qin Xiao stood up and left. After the annoying person left, Lin Xian picked up the chopsticks and looked at the food in front of him. They were all things he had never seen before, but he could eat them boldly without worrying that the food would not suit his appetite. He first picked up the tomato scrambled eggs and put them into his mouth to taste. It was a little sour, but it tasted good. Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan without blinking, watching him eat corn stewed pork ribs, potato stewed beef, tomato scrambled eggs was the best, and he ate a lot of it. She looked at the 4 happiness meatballs and watched him eat 2 in a row. There were still 2 left on the plate. She licked her lips, so greedy. She was afraid that the last 2 would also be eaten by Xiao Jinyan, so she pointed at the 4 happiness meatballs with her slender jade fingers and said, "Husband, there are still 2 4 happiness meatballs. Can you leave them for me?" Lin Xian paused chewing, he glanced at the 4 happiness meatballs, and then looked at Shen Shuwei, only to see that she was looking at him expectantly, and inexplicably felt that the scene was a little familiar. Shen Shuwei was afraid that Xiao Jinyan would not give her, so she whispered again, "I haven't eaten 4 happiness meatballs for a long time." It was obviously the food she made, but when she wanted to eat it, she asked herself, is her husband very harsh to her? How can a man who treats a woman so harshly be worthy of her deep affection? "You eat it? My husband is the best." Shen Shuwei happily picked up the spare chopsticks, picked up the 60 meatballs, put them into her mouth and took a bite. After eating the 60 meatballs, she showed a satisfied smile. Lin Xian looked at her eating 60 meatballs, as happy as a child. He found that after seeing her eating, he had more appetite. After a while, Shen Shuwei ate 2 60 meatballs into her stomach. After eating 2 of the 4, she was still very satisfied. After eating, Shen Shuwei put the bowl into the food box. Lin Xian wiped the corners of his lips with a square handkerchief, and his eyes fell on Shen Shuwei, looking at the men's clothes she was wearing. Maybe she was too thin and her clothes were a little loose. The red clothes matched her skin color very well. After Shen Shuwei packed up everything, he opened the medicine box and took out the tools he would use later. She looked at Xiao Jinyan and said, "Husband, let me treat your leg." Lin Xian pursed his lips, but still said, "Don't call me husband." Shen Chu blinked his beautiful big eyes twice, "Husband, doesn't that sound good?" Lin Xian shook his head, "No. Since it sounds good, let's call you husband." Shen Shuwei moved a small stool and sat down, bending down and neatly rolling up his trouser legs. Lin Xian lowered his eyes and watched Shen Shuwei roll up his trouser legs, skillfully using the silver needle to find acupuncture points. He could not see them before and ignored many details, but now he could see them. He found that the woman in front of him was not only very beautiful, but also not empty. "You treat me so well now, if you find out in the future that I am not your husband." Before Lin Xian finished speaking, Shen Shuwei said, "Everyone will admit their mistakes, but my husband will not admit his mistakes. I treat my husband well because he is worth it." Lin Xian was stunned when he heard this. Shen Chu slightly raised his head with a palm-sized face, and arched his eyebrows. "My husband treats me very well." Lin Xian pursed his lips and looked at her, unable to say a word. The treatment process was long and boring. Lin Xian kept staring at Shen Shuwei, unable to imagine that such a young woman could have such superb medical skills. After the treatment was over, it was late at night again. "Husband, let me help you go to bed and rest." Shen Shuwei put his arm on her shoulders and put one arm around his waist as usual. Obviously he will experience these days, but at this moment, Lin Xian can't help but feel the close body. Thinking of the experience of being kissed in his mind, his ears can't help but turn red. After going to bed and without physical contact, Lin Xian felt better. Shen Chu stretched slightly and looked at Xiao Jinyan lying on the bed. She originally wanted to kiss him good night, but thinking about his reactions the previous 2 times, she held back. "Husband, I'm going back." Lin Xianying was neither a husband nor a husband, so he had no choice but to remain silent. Shen Shuwei didn't care. At this time, she was already tired and wanted to sleep. After packing everything, she left. But Lin Xian couldn't sleep. He thought he was too excited to sleep because he could see it. On the way back, Qin Xiao asked Shen Shuwei, "When will master remember his identity?" Shen Shuwei shrugged helplessly, "I don't know. No matter when he thinks of it, we will take him away after he is cured." Qin was a little worried, "But if the master doesn't volunteer, we can't take him away." Shen Chu smiled slightly, "Coax, I think he is quite easy to coax. Look at him. At first I called him husband and he was so angry that he refused to let me call him. Now I call him husband and he accepts it." The corners of Qin Xiao's mouth twitched fiercely. How can the master be so easy to coax? In the days that followed, Shen Shuwei continued to cook delicious food for Xiao Jinyan in various ways, while satisfying her own appetite. "After all, after eating too much food here, I don't think it tastes good." When Xiao Jinyan was eating, Shen Shuwei would also take a few bites with spare chopsticks. After more than half a month of careful maintenance by Shen Shuwei, Xiao Jinyan gained some weight and looked much better. Even Lin Xian himself noticed that his physical condition had improved a lot, and his sleep and appetite had also improved. He stared at Shen Shuwei for a while. Such a good wife felt that her husband was taking advantage of her. Shen Shuwei noticed that he had been staring at her. She came over with a smile on her face and asked expectantly, "Husband, do you remember me?" Lin Xian looked at the woman who suddenly came over. Her starry eyes seemed to be able to talk, staring at him unblinkingly. He shook his head, realizing something was wrong, and said again, "I'm not." Shen Shuwei was a little helpless. "When will my husband think of me?" Lin Xian said calmly, "I want to rest." "I'm sleepy too." Shen Shuwei came closer and asked expectantly, "Husband, can I stay tonight?" Lin Xian refused directly, "No." "Okay, I'll go back and rest." Shen Shuwei didn't force it. She looked at Xiao Jinyan's lips and planned to kiss him good night. She thought so and did so. She leaned forward and kissed her. Lin Xian was lying on the bed and was being kissed. The soft touch made him stunned. He couldn't see her before, and the gentle kiss meant that he had no time to react. Only this time, it felt a little different from that time. Maybe it's because he can see and know what the person who kisses him looks like. If you like someone, you will like to be close to him. When Shen Shuwei was with Xiao Jinyan, she would close the bed curtains and do intimate things, and she would also take the initiative to kiss Xiao Jinyan.